This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast presented by ClutchPoints, powered by DraftKings. Like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Sheldon Alexander. I'm joined, as always, on a Wednesday morning by my guy, Matt Russell, sports betting professional and creator of The Window, available on Substack and wherever you get your podcasts. Matt Russell, it is, as mentioned, another week in the NFL. Week 11.
Yes, sir.
Week 11. How are you feeling, my dude?
I'm good. I think you mentioned that it's the morning, like another 10 more minutes of complaining that you and I just did before we hit record, and it might not be the morning anymore. That's how much you and I've got to say as far as what's going on in our respective lives. So other than that, man, like, again, we say it every week, like, can't believe it's this far in, like, we're in the groove here, right? Like week 12 in college football, week 11 in the NFL. What a time to be alive. Mid-November, weather turning, cozy season, right? There's snow somehow involved. Like, I was on a golf course like a week ago, and yet somehow we're snowing. Like, it's just an absolute mess here. But pumped, man. Let's get into it here. We got 15 games to do this week because there's 2 teams on bye. Like, we gotta go.
Lots going on here. Week 11 of the NFL season. And of course, for the folks who might be new to what we do here, I'm going to go through and give you a pick to each and every game on the NFL schedule. And Matt comes in with the information and education on where the line was, where it is, where it could be going heading into kickoff. The goal is that I try and come out on the other end with a much more informed pick. I play the role of the viewer, and sometimes Matt convinced me to change my pick, and other times I foolishly don't listen. Like when we're talking about the Panthers being 5.5-point favorites against anybody.
Yes.
But we'll get there soon.
Yes.
We'll get there soon.
I thought of you.
But as I always say, that's the joke. That's the bit. That's the show. The goal, as I mentioned, win more than I lose. Last week, 8-6.
Come on.
I'm going to take that.
Okay.
I'm going to take 8-6. There were points where last week was rough. I'm not even going to. There are points I looked up at some of the scores. I was at work on last Sunday, and I was just like, whoo, what is going on here? Things were not going well. So to come out with an 8-6, I'm going to take that. 76 and 73 on the season. We'll keep things moving here. As mentioned, week 11, bye weeks, Colts and Saints, the aforementioned high-powered Saints.
That's right.
On a bye this week. But of course, friends, we begin on Thursday Night Football, as we always do, with the Jets and the Patriots. The Patriots laying 12.5 points here, and a huge win by the Pats last week. I did say I was going to be very impressed with the Pats if they went into Tampa and won that game. And they did surprise me. Like, even in the way that they won, it was still like, all right, we've been waiting for Travion Henderson, and here we go. He had a big time game. I thought that whole story about him getting chirped by his teammates about not being able to be a game breaker was pretty funny. The teammates chirping him, and then he goes out and does that. Pretty funny. Meanwhile, the Jets, though, they got a win. Big special teams play by them. They beat the Browns. Cool. They got a couple, kick returns. Cool. Yeah. This one's tough. 12.5 points is a lot of points.
Sure.
But I still think the Jets suck. Like, I think they really suck. And if not, and listen, special teams is a part of the process too. Special teams is allowed to do positive things and be an advantage for you. But I can't bank on that 2 weeks in a row. And I just think the Patriots are way better. Patriots seem to be locked in. Patriots, even though this is a divisional matchup, I just think the Pats are at a position here. Vrabel seems to have them locked in where they know they kind of got to keep rolling here. And, the division is really in their hands. If they can keep this going, they can keep this moving, which, listen, we talked about the Pats at the start of the season in terms of what their schedule would be like. And so it's not like we're super surprised by how their season is gone, right? Like, expecting them to kind of be good this year. But at the same time, laying 12.5 points is a lot. But I'm going to do it here, mostly because I think the Jets are just that bad.
Yeah, sometimes I sit and I just go like, I can't. It's really annoying how sophisticated the betting markets have become in the last like 5 years or so. Because I feel like 15 years ago, regardless of how it happened, which was obviously absurd, right? Like a 5 minute gap in like our lives when all of a sudden the Jets had a kick return and a punt return touchdown. That for those of us who were on the under, and I would make that bet, by the way, a
Mhm.
million times over again, and I would probably, I guess, lose it a million times if a team is going to have two special teams touchdowns, particularly like in the same quarter. And that special teams coordinator is just sitting back and going, Aaron Glenn, yeah, I'm coming for your job, man. I'm the only one who's doing anything around here. And so he probably should have like zoomed in for one of our complaint session from before the show,
Oof.
because he probably has some beef as well. I don't even know who the special teams coordinator necessarily is. I probably should, because if that's what we're going to get here from Thursday night on against, with the Jets. But my point is that like two straight wins for the Jets, right? It's like, oh, back-to-back wins. Like this team should have, in theory, a better rating. And when I say that, I mean like 10 years ago, the betting market would be like, oh, I don't know, the Jets, like they've been getting it done a little bit lately. But now we are more in tune with underlying metrics and sort of understanding like what would be required for the Jets to be even a 9.5 point underdog, right? Something that's a little bit more palatable from a betting perspective. Because, if people have been paying attention to this podcast and frankly the stuff we do over at the window, like, Thursday nights have gone pretty well over the course of this season, and there's a certain like streak that we may have over the course of this season. And like I was waiting for Thanksgiving, and there's 3 games on a Thursday, and you're like, oh, then I can't be expected to win every single one of those games on Thursday, but I'd like to get there before we have to put this streak sort of in real jeopardy. And now the NFL provides us with like the dumbest game of the week to sort of try to figure that out, because this line opens 10.5, 11 for the Patriots. And in my head, I'm like, well, maybe people will be interested in the Jets because of, these couple of wins that they've had. We can maybe get down to -10. And then like I blink and the number was up to 13.
Yeah.
And so
I saw it
that
at 13
seems
and a
to be,
half this morning, and then it went back
yes.
down to 12 and a half.
Yeah. And so, obviously some hypothesis on like, is it going to get to 14? And it's like, it kind of never goes all the way to the key number. Somebody usually kind of sweeps in and goes like, all right, like, let's not get crazy here. But I think and takes the underdog, even though like the underdog could be a real grim situation here because of how the offense plays, which is, essentially non-existent. And what the Patriots did last Sunday and what they continue to do since
Mhm.
that game against the Steelers, which I think is like week two or week 3, and that game's going to come up a little later on in this show as well. But like that game was incredibly sloppy in them losing that game to the Steelers, right? Like they'll turn the ball over like 6 times, fumble the ball constantly. Basically, since then, like Vrabel's got that operation like super buttoned up, man. Like
Yeah.
there isn't a ton of turnovers, not a ton of penalties, stuff that doesn't kill you. And as you and I talk about all the time, man, you just have to not screw stuff up in this league, because
Yeah.
so many of the other teams are willing to screw things up because they just don't have the operation sort of buttoned up in the way that like a professional football team probably should. And so I could kind of see just New England kind of showing up for this game, obviously at home, and just doing things correctly, and the Jets not really being able to score. And all of a sudden, when it's like 23-3, maybe you're out there sweating a late touchdown for the Jets, but like it's probably not going to come because that's just where we're at with regards to the Jets, who have been moved to, honestly, because the Titans are coming off their bye week and they're getting a little bit of sort of like credit in sort of the expectation for how the Titans might play. Speaking of
Yeah.
things we're going to talk about later, the Jets are rated right now as the worst team in the league. They just won 2 straight. So you know what I mean? Like it's like, wow, like it'd be one thing
Tough
if
to
they
do.
won 2 straight and like, I don't know, the third or fourth worst team. It's like, yeah, like you said, it's tough to do. It's tough to win 2 straight. And for the betting market to be like, God, I don't think so, guys. And obviously part of that is like the Quinnen Williams trade, Sauce Gardner trade, and just the
Mhm.
general attitude of like, let's wait till next year. And honestly, the management team was probably watching those two special teams touchdowns and kind of sitting there like me with an under ticket going like, what are you idiots doing? Like we have a plan in place here, which I am calling, by the way, the Mendoza line for
Ooh.
Fernando Mendoza, in that like these teams who are kind of tanking, if you will, are trying to shoot for the number one pick or at least a high pick to get maybe Fernando Mendoza. And so the Jets right now are the only team below the Mendoza line, which we always talk about is 20 out of 100 in our estimated rating scale.
Mhm.
And so they're below, right? So we know, okay, like that's a pretty low rating. Obviously, market doesn't care that they just won 2 straight games. The interesting thing for me is like the Patriots rating keeps moving up as it should because they keep covering games. Obviously, 2 weeks ago they didn't end up covering that game against the Falcons. But let's put it this way, like compare them with other teams, maybe not necessarily saying like, oh yeah, they are as equal to some of these other teams, but there's a pretty significant gap between the Patriots, who are kind of leading the way in the, I don't say middle of the pack because that sort of underrates them, but like they are not rated in the same level of the Bills, the Lions, the Ravens, the Packers, the Seahawks now,
Mhm.
and the Colts. And so, if any of those teams were playing the Jets at home, we would see this line be even higher than it is. And so, if you think to yourself, like, hang on a sec, like, I think the Patriots, leading their division by 2.5 games, no matter how they've gotten there,
Mhm.
are at least somewhere in the neighborhood of the Seahawks or the Colts or Packers, Ravens, Rams, et cetera, then like this line probably could and should be over 14, into that 14 and a half range.
Yeah.
And so really it's just kind of a referendum on how you feel about the Patriots with regards to comparison of those other teams. If you think they're close to the Seahawks, if you think they're close to the Bills, a team they beat in Buffalo this season, then honestly, you shouldn't be that scared of laying the points here with the Patriots. And by the way, like, we talk about not wanting to be sort of, late to the party or missing kind of the best of the number, which was, like I said, like 10 and a half, 11 on Sunday night. Listen, this might come back to burn us here. Is there really that much difference between 11 and a half and 12 and a half, right? As we know, right?
Mhm.
The key numbers 10, even 11 sometimes, and of course 14. And so if we think that the Patriots are on the level or close to the level, doesn't have to be exactly on the level of some of those other teams that I mentioned, then this line could be easily over 2 touchdowns. And the fact that it's not, and maybe the Patriots are on those teams' level, again, because they don't screw things up. And that sounds like a backhanded compliment, by the way. They also
No.
had 3 touchdowns of like over 50 yards, right? So there's also now with the Travion Henderson thing, and obviously Drake May being able to throw these deep balls that he's so good at, they're kind of doing both, right? They're kind of just playing like a nice straightforward football game that's going to get you, a long way in the NFL while also having some explosiveness here as well. So between those two things, I don't really have a problem with laying the points here with the New England Patriots as long as it's underneath 14.
Yeah, no, totally with you there. I think the only like pause or the surface level thing that might be holding this up too is just a age old divisional matchup, blah blah blah, like that side of it too, where it's like
Sure.
we're learning at certain points doesn't matter, especially when you're talking about a team being playing such a high level versus the Jets, right?
Yeah, and a lot of that sort of narrative element came from a history of teams that had coaches for a long period of time, right?
Yes.
So it'd be, I
And
go back to like the
stylistically, these
cow.
divisions play like a certain style, so they match up well because they play the same type of way.
Right. And even if a team like the Cowboys, right, like they changed from Jimmy Johnson to Barry Switzer, it's like, yeah, they're still running the same stuff
Yeah.
for like a decade straight. And,
Yep.
obviously that's kind of going back to the 90s, but even like, Patriots versus whomever in the division, if that coach has been there for, more than 2 or 3 years, the way that coaching turnover is in the NFL, like these teams are changing so drastically every year that
Mhm.
like, the division thing doesn't really kind of add up in the same way that it used to, where teams, we always talk about the NFC West and particularly like San Francisco, LA. Like those are kind of the only two because those coaches have been there for so long. Like that's the only thing it really applies to because
Yeah.
you can't really find another like coach versus coach matchup that has played each other 10 times for the last 5 years because inevitably somebody's going somewhere else, right? And so, yeah, I mean, you just look at the AFC East here, right? Like, yeah, if Sean McDermott and the Bills had any other team that had the same coach for an extended period of time, you're like, oh, wait, don't they have the Miami Dolphins and Mike McDaniel? Like, yeah, they do. And they just lost to the Dolphins. And they, had a struggle with them early on in the season. And so that's where that applies. But it isn't just simply division, it's more about coaching matchup, right? And sometimes, because the way the schedule works, use Buffalo as another example here, Kansas City, right? Like they play them every year. Like it's kind of, it's, there's more to be sort of said for teams that play each other all the time versus necessarily just being in the same division.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Before we head overseas once again to Spain for another interesting matchup.
Are we going? Let's go.
Let's go.
That sounds like something this show should be doing, Shell.
That would be lots of fun. Maybe if we come up with some big wins or ways to come up with some big wins.
We need a 15-0 week. 15-0 week. You and I are in Ibiza next year. Sorry, Ibiza next year.
That's
in Spain, right?
Sure. But before we get to
sure.
Before we get to our next game, here's a special message. The NBA season's rolling, and DraftKings' newest game, Pick 6, is the easiest way to play for your shot at big wins. NBA stars are lighting it up. Now, their numbers aren't just highlights, they're your shot to cash in. Here's how it works. Just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats. The better your picks, the bigger your payout. So nail your picks tonight and don't just win, stack up those payouts. New DraftKings customers get $50 in Pick 6 credits with just a $5 entry on your first pick set. Don't just watch basketball, pick, play, cash in. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code CLUTCH. That's code CLUTCH. Play just $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Make the call, ride the upside in partnership with DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Ends December 2nd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promo. And we are back. We're in Spain.
Next year, Shell, in Spain, you're doing, we're going to 15-0. Okay. We're going to Spain. You're doing that entire thing in Spanish from the beach. That's what's on the line here for 15.
I like it. I like it. Sorry. Well, let's start the run here by correctly picking this game between the Commanders and the Dolphins. What a matchup.
Yeah.
Every time I look at some of these, right? I mean, although last week's Colts Falcons game, I mean, it went to overtime. There's stuff happening. It was entertaining. It was entertaining.
The NFL accidentally sent good teams last week.
Yeah.
Like, why would Europe in its entirety is sitting around going like, wait, what? Where are the Jags?
Didn't know this was possible. What a good running back. What's happening here? But back to the normally scheduled programming of bad NFL teams overseas. Got the Commanders and the Dolphins. Dolphins laying 2.5 points. And I got to be honest, very few times I'm like absolutely stunned by the NFL. Like absolutely. Mm-hmm. But the Dolphins not just beating the Bills, but convincingly beating the Bills last week was a thing. Something that didn't really surprise me was the word of news trickling out of Mike McDaniel driving around Miami near the Elbow Room, which is a bar that Bills fans supposedly go to when they're in Miami. And your boy's driving in his car, trolling Bills fans. It's just like, what are we doing, man? What is
He's
happening?
Basically George Costanza. He's trying. He's grabbing the Super Bowl trophy and like strapping it to the back of the car while he's doing this. Right, just driving around and clanking the Super Bowl, the undefeated 1972 Dolphins Super Bowl trophy behind him. Clank, 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 clank. Wearing a bodysuit at this point. Like he's trying so hard to get fired. He's like, we keep winning every once in a while. Like this is brutal.
Insane stuff there. But also, so I'll start here. I know one of your things we
Mhm.
talk about that you've taught me is the
Mm,
bounce back week from a team, or sorry, the letdown week from a team that had the jump and hug game. Last week,
sure.
definitely a jump and hug game for the Dolphins. And so I'd be kind of
Yeah.
hesitant to just ride with them again. The problem is, though, the Commanders. I mean, I don't know how you just told me
Dog.
the Jets are the worst team in the league. This version of the Commanders, they got to be knocking at that door somehow, some
Sure.
way. And it has me without even blinking, being like, yeah, Miami laying that 2.5 points. Go Commanders are injured. I mean,
Yeah.
Marcus Mariota, yeah. There's just so much going on
Yeah.
here. Too much going on here to the point where I can't fathom myself taking the Commanders in this game. And that's a bad place to be
Yeah.
at.
Right. Well, let's understand like how we got to the place that we got, and I think you're sort of on the right track here. Where are the Commanders going to be the next team that makes that sort of foray into and around the Mendoza line? Right,
Mhm.
where you're making a run at 20 out of 100 from your in your market rating for an individual game, because that's kind of what it takes. Not quite to 20. I have it sort of at 27
Okay.
for the Commanders rating, which again 2 weeks ago they were just 3-point underdogs to the Seahawks.
Yeah.
And like if you take the current Seahawks rating and the current Washington Commanders rating and you go back and you sort of make a line for that game, it's Seattle minus 10 in that game. And now, like, listen, the Seattle absolutely trucked
Yeah.
them, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, probably should have been minus 10 because, like, look at what's happened, honestly, with both of those teams in that game and since. So it's just crazy that 2 weeks later, obviously hindsight being 2020, that like we as a betting market were off by 7 full points. And I think honestly that game might have closed even lower than three, closer to like 2.5. And by
Mhm.
the way, the Commanders got money last week as well, because I think when
They
we did the
did.
show, it was like 9, and we were like, oh God, I don't know how we get to 9. Like just mathematically, I don't know how we get to 9. And the betting market swooped in and was like, yeah, you're right. Like 9 is too high and knocked it down to 7.5. It became teaser viable, got in on that a little bit.
Mhm.
And then, of course, Detroit absolutely waylays the Commanders. And again, obviously the rating is what it is, and it could go a little bit lower. But that being said, if it's going lower on the premise of because it can't be that Jaden Daniels is not playing, right? Because we know from earlier on in the season what the Marcus Mariota Commanders rating should be, and they've even like won a game in that situation. And honestly, we're pretty competitive against the Chiefs not that long ago. Yeah, you go, okay, well, Terry McLaurin's also out. Deron Payne's punching people, and so he's not going to play in this game. And so I just sort of, in a vacuum, just go like 27, like that should be a buy sign on the Commanders. Meanwhile, like the Dolphins rating has gone up to a point where like I'm not super comfortable backing the Dolphins at this rating. But when you jam these two teams together, all you're really doing is asking the Dolphins to win by a field goal, and that becomes this sort of very appealing type of a thing. I think of, as I mentioned before, that Steelers game against the Patriots, and why I'm sort of thinking about that is because the Steelers go and they win that game, but they turn over the Patriots enough that nobody was really kind of buying into the Steelers the next week when they had to travel to London, I believe it was, some European international game,
Mhm.
and they faced the Vikings, and the Vikings had just come off of the first game with Carson Wentz. They had blown out the Bengals, Jake Browning, things of that nature, and so the betting market like totally swung from the Steelers being favored in that game in the look ahead line to the Vikings being favored because it was like, well, the Steelers team like got lucky last week, and like look at the Vikings and Carson Wentz is doing stuff and whatever. And it was kind of this one game sample size where people were interested in the Vikings, and like the line pushed all the way up to, well, certainly like the Vikings being a favorite, not quite to a field goal. And then of course you like turn on the game and the Steelers have kind of like just you know taken like a 2 or 3 touchdown lead, and they go on to hang on to victory, for victory. And I think part of the problem with and the struggle with handicapping these international games, I don't know what happens, man. As soon as they get on the plane, they go overseas. It's kind of like a young student trying to find themselves overseas. It's like, what's happened in my life as a high school student? Like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be my new self over here. Like, they're like finding themselves in these games, Or it can go the other way, right? Where it's like, yeah, I've been studying so hard my entire like high school career, I'm going to take this gap year and I'm going to get super loose when it comes to getting, overseas. I it's not a bye week that kind of turns the tables on this stuff, but it's just sort of being away from your general situation
Yeah.
that turns the tables on some of this stuff. Meanwhile, you got Washington, who, like, speaking of like the school element or, whatever, you go, Dan Quinn is going to take over the defense basically. Now, listen, Dan Quinn's watching all the time, but like if the boss was coming in and being like, yo, I am coming in here. And it's funny because they looked across the field, I think, last week and saw Dan Campbell calling offensive plays for the Lions and was like, you know what? I like that idea.
Seems like some good PR.
It's just like, look what happened. Sure. The Lions are playing much better, right? And so, like, I don't know from a personnel perspective how much the Commanders are possibly going to play better, but like if each individual guy is, again, a little bit more buttoned up, a little more P's and Q's, et cetera, we talk about the Dolphins offense, and it's very sort of like, all right, you're going here, and everybody kind of knows it, and it's up to you to kind of stop that. If the head coach, whose best thing that he's ever done in the NFL is be a defensive coordinator, right? It's how these guys got these jobs, by either being, by and large, either an offensive guy or a defensive guy. If he's going to take over and and get this thing a little bit buttoned up and have this team sort of relatively focused, I can't be laying even the 2.5 with the Dolphins. And I think we're going to get, and again, we're talking about a starting point of 27 out of 100 from the Commanders. If I get a 35 out of the Commanders, then this game should kind of come down to the wire here, because I don't know how much more the Dolphins necessarily have. And again, watching that game against the Bills last week, I don't know how much of that was Dolphins related. You and I always talk about from a matchup perspective, again, things that will come up later on in the show, that the Bills struggle against the run. And if you can run the football against the Bills, you can beat the Bills. They are not built to beat the run first team. Yeah. And so in our mindset, we think of that as the big team, the Derrick Henry, the Ravens, and it's Patrick Ricard out there, 300-pound fullback, and so on and so forth. But like, it also applies to the Dolphins, who are just crack backing and countering and hitting you with Devon Achane until you're just absolutely sick of it from like a speed perspective. And so, like, I don't think it was necessarily Tua doing a bunch of like awesome stuff. And I do think that the Bills beat themselves. You saw a handful of fumbles. Like James Cook had one, Josh Allen had one. Allen had even at 16-0, I was like, I think that Bills could come back here if they, again, button things up. And then Josh Allen immediately throws an interception in the end zone. And so, again, I think part of that is the Dolphins getting turnovers that I'm not super sure this Dolphins defense can necessarily rely on a week-to-week basis. So I'm going to wait and sort of hope this gets up to 3, because I think that, the market is going to be interested in the Dolphins here, thinking that 2.5, like, this is an easy sort of, win by a field goal situation. I think they felt the same way, again, weeks ago when Minnesota, off of one game, was getting all kinds of credit flipping the line. That, by the way, like, before the season started, and listen, lots happened since before the season started, but Washington was a -2.5 favorite in this game in the summer look-ahead line. And we're even a short favorite before last week, which, again, by the way, the Dolphins, right? We're 9.5-point home underdogs just last week. So as much as we talk about like the Commanders switch in 2 weeks from a rating perspective, it's been 1 week and the Dolphins have a pretty significant change to their rating as well. And that's just usually something where it's like buy low, sell high. And it's weird to say that we're selling high on the Dolphins, but like, if we get an opportunity to sell high on this Dolphins team, with DJ Mike McDaniel, like, taking this group overseas, I don't know. I kind of trust Dan Quinn kind of going, all right, I'm taking over defensive play calling, like enough BS of, again, getting beat by really good teams the last 2 weeks, and just sort of trusting them to, kind of be a little bit more focused in this game versus a Dolphins team I don't really trust to win 2 straight games. I've talked about the bad teams not being able to do it 2 weeks in a row. And again, if we think the Dolphins are a bad team, I don't think they're going to be able to do it 2 weeks in a row. Now, it's scary because the Commanders have been dreadful, but here we are.
Yeah, it's a super tough one here, and I'll be honest, super, super close to changing the pick here. But the reality is, whichever side I would end up being on, literally whatever side I would end up being on, I just feel like I'm going to end up disappointed here, because my expectations for both are just so bad that it's like, am I going to get mad that the Dolphins return to their bleepery? Am I going to get mad that Marcus Mariota couldn't lead the team in Spain? Like, I don't know what's going on here. This is a tough one. I'm going to be honest. And I would advise most people to, maybe save your money and save it for the next game, which is a big boy game.
Yeah.
Which includes the Seattle Seahawks at the Rams. Rams laying 2.5 points at home, dominating wins by both teams. Seattle versus the Cards. I think it was like 35-0 in the second quarter last week. The Seahawks just rolling, their defense rolling. Speaking of head coaches taking over the defense, Mike McDonald's defense. I know he's not the defensive coordinator, but he is known for his defense, right?
Yeah, it's his defense. Yeah.
It's his defense. They've been balling. On the flip side, also balling, Matthew Stafford and company. Big win against the Niners, rolling into San Fran, a little revenge game for them. And their offense is really, really good. Matthew Stafford getting some MVP buzz, which I know is a market that you're very familiar with and has been locked into for the season. My question, I wonder, can the Seahawks slow down Matthew Stafford and the Rams, or can Sam Darnold and the offense make enough plays to keep up? I got to say here, this is one where the 2.5 has me on the Rams, just thinking they can win by a field goal here. The institution of built-in Matthew Stafford and company at home, which I know home field doesn't matter, but you'd rather play this game in LA than in Seattle, obviously.
No, for sure.
The 2.5, because it's 2.5, I'm on the Rams here. At 3, I'd really start thinking about the Seahawks here, because I've been week after week. I don't know how many bets in a row I've won on the Seahawks for the last however many weeks, and they're just steamrolling everybody.
Yeah, and again, that's, as we talked about the Commanders, right? Like part of that revision line of that game 2 weeks ago being Seahawks -10, if it was played today or this week, is that the Seahawks rating has gone through the roof. Well, the Rams rating has also gone through the roof, right?
Correct.
Because, and how we know that, and this is what makes that previous game that we talked about that much more difficult, because those two teams don't play next week, so we don't even get a look ahead line to sort of get an understanding of how, the market rates a team and odds makers rate a team at large, right? Because that second data point and looking ahead to next week and going, all right, like, we can you can sort of move the numbers around to get to a number this week, but it has to also be congruent with what's happening next week. And honestly, this game is a more interesting game from a football perspective. I've been saying, early on in the week here that the two best teams in the NFC are playing this week. And Philadelphia and Detroit are also playing this week. And so, again, that's my respect level for both of these teams. And so when both of these teams have shot through the moon here and we look ahead to next week and we go, okay, Rams play on Sunday night next week at home against Tampa Bay, that line's 6.5 for the Rams, right? Like that is a pretty significant bump off of like what that would have been even a couple of weeks ago. And yes, Seattle plays Tennessee in Tennessee next week, so you're expecting a pretty sizable line. How's 12.5 taste? You know what I mean? Like Seattle 12.5 on the road again against Tennessee, but like that's a big number, right? Like that is giving Seattle this credit that I inferred earlier when we were talking about where the Patriots rating should probably be. It's put the Seahawks up in Packers, Lions, even sort of Eagles, Ravens, Colts territory, right? And so I would normally be like, well, we have to fade the Seahawks after getting that big of a ratings boost. Well, guess who the number 2 team in the NFL is now by odds makers power ratings? It's the Los Angeles Rams. So it's like, so we're not getting any deals here with the Rams. And of course, the other element beyond just the sort of humor of this line being around 3, you talking about it coming down to a field goal. The reality is, if the Rams had decent kicking this year, they might be undefeated at this point.
So true. Yeah.
And so you're like, if it's going to come down to a field goal, it's like, oh no, that's Josh Carty's music. And now you're like, well, I don't want it to come down to a field goal if it's in this guy's, on this guy's foot. And so like, that's kind of a fascinating element too. And then you also mentioned perfectly, again, we don't plan this, just the idea of like, what if this was three? Well, Shell, like, what are you going to do? What would you say to the people who are looking around who are at different sports books? We're going off of DraftKings Sportsbook. You can see that -2.5 is -120.
Mhm.
It's not far fetched to go and look at some other spots and see that the number is a flat three.
Hmm.
So you see the pickle that we're all in here,
Yes.
right? Where you're like, yeah, -2.5. Like, I'm into that. And it's like, well, what if it's a flat three? And you're like, well, I would also be
Well,
into that. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean. Like, I'm super pumped to watch this game because you mentioned the MVP element, right? Because let's put it this way, how is Matt Stafford the favorite to win MVP next week if they lose this game to Sam Darnold and the Seahawks? And if they do, probably means that Sam Darnold did some work this week, and maybe
mhm.
he should be more in the mix with regards to the MVP. And so that market is completely in flux. Drake May and Matthew Stafford are all of a sudden the co-favorites for MVP 2 weeks after it being like a Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes thing going into that game. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
like the Baker Mayfield era of MVP is long over, right? And
Yeah.
again, it just reminds you that like maybe we don't do anything with regards to MVP until like week 10 or 11 and maybe sort of buy low on some of these scenarios for the last couple of months.
Mhm.
It's why I like offensive player of the year and defensive player a lot better before the season. We're holding amazing positions over at the window on the favorites there, Jonathan Taylor and Myles Garrett, because that's
Mhm.
easier to sort of apply, hey, you're going to have really big season. I'm going to bet on you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys who are going to have really big seasons, but you have to start doing the math with regards to like how good you've been relative to the talent around you and so on and so forth. I don't know how we're not all rich. What did we say before the season started, right? I'm going to be betting, as long as Matthew Stafford is involved, I'm basically probably going to be betting on the Rams every single week because Matthew Stafford being involved. And again, before the season started, we were worried about his back,
Yeah.
right? And that holding up. We're 10 weeks into the season, and my guy's throwing 4 touchdowns every week, or we have 3 or 4 touchdowns every week to an assortment of tight ends, which is a whole other thing that we could talk about if you really wanted to. And sure enough, like I think, we bet him on week 1, we won there. They go and they lose that game, worst beat of the season to the Eagles in week 3. And, so there's like, and we bet against them against San Francisco in that first game and ended up getting home on that one. I think we won the bet with the Colts in week 4. So it's been a
Mhm.
bit of like an up and down thing. But these last 3 weeks, right? Jacksonville, New
Mhm.
Orleans, hammering them at a big number.
Yeah.
And then, of course, San Francisco last week. And, there's the whole Baltimore game that got super weird as far as like where the point spread was and maybe who should have covered that game and who not. But it just goes to show, right? If you just kind of blindly just keep throwing money at the Rams here, you're going to be okay because we felt like they should maybe be a team that is the number 2 team or so, in that sort of
Yeah.
low
Yeah.
70s like Super Bowl contender. And like that's where they are. Like we did it. We got to
Mhm.
that point. Unfortunately, we probably should have made more money along the way riding them upwards, right? And that's the frustrating part about the NFL. Sometimes you can pick out the Seahawks, the Colts, and the Rams and even the Patriots and just ride them up. But like each step forward seems like it might be a step too far. And so with these two teams, it seems like it might be a step too far. They just happen to be playing each other this week.
Yeah.
So again, all this is to say, like, yeah, at +3, yeah, Seahawks are probably a good idea. Rams at -2.5. Rams also probably a good idea. So if I had to pick one, I would take the Rams based on everything that I've just kind of said about the idea of at least I can go back to before the season and say, yeah, I was, riding the Rams or at least planned to ride the Rams all the way, kind of not to the Super Bowl necessarily, but like throughout the season, as long as Matthew Stafford was there. From an injury perspective, they are the more healthy team. And I started looking at Seattle and you go, okay, there's some questionable key players on this roster. Starting on the offensive line, right? Jalen Sundell, the center, he goes out. Olu Oluwatimi comes in last week, immediately fumble snap with Sam Darnold. You're like, that's a little too on the nose, NFL. Like center goes out and then you immediately fumble a snap.
Mhm.
And then it doesn't, we'll see about Ernest Jones, right? Quarterback of the defense. He was, acquired in a trade last year for the Seahawks. Another, one of like 10 examples of, by the way, like the organization, general manager, scouting, all of these guys, like going out and making these tiny moves that nobody was like hailing at the time, but were like really awesome moves. One of those such moves, Nick Imenwari from, in the draft, rookie sort of hybrid safety nickel corner that's come in and changed the defense. And from like a football perspective, I referenced the tight ends that the Rams are throwing out there. Tom Brady, if you watch the game, like he mentioned, this incredibly like, I think listen, it's 3 hours of listening to Tom Brady talk about football. You should probably get one really good anecdote. But he talks about the Rams going like, yeah, they run these three tight end sets. That when you run a three tight end set, like you're big, and teams have to go man to man against that because you're big and it's supposed to be a run formation, and they're
Yeah.
passing out of this run formation because all of those tight ends, Higbee, Allen, the kid Ferguson, speaking of second round pick from out of Oregon, all these guys can catch passes. And so if you have to go and bring a bunch of linebackers in and you can't go nickel against that offense, you are immediately sort of compromised if your secondary is one of your strengths, which in the case of the Seahawks, right? They have these like 4 or 5 really outstanding players in their secondary. Like that's really great when you're matching up against receivers, but when you're matching up against tight ends, like the Rams can slowly matriculate because you're not big enough to be able to cover some of these guys, right? Even the best corners in the league can struggle against tight ends because just of the sheer size of some of these guys. And so that to me, I think might be the difference here in that the Rams have kind of unlocked this thing where, as Brady says, like if you're just running like a normal, maybe old school Rams, remember when they used to just run like 3 wide receivers every single time and they'd run like five, different sort of plays and variations off those plays? The defense can have like, he said, like 40 to 50 different coverages
Yeah.
against that kind of like base offense. When he's like, you have to go man to man against those, 2 and 3 tight end sets, which like I think Brady knows enough about 2 tight end sets to sort of understand this. The other team has like 4 different coverage options. He's like, that makes it so much easier on the quarterback. And when your quarterback is Matthew Stafford, no wonder he's throwing for 4 touchdowns every game and like just vibing his face off out there. He's basically Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting, holding up the paper on fire and going like, do you know how easy this is for me? Like, I'm sorry this isn't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry you guys didn't come up with the plan for the 3 tight end deal, but like, this is so easy for me. And by the way, my receivers, when we have 2 receivers out there, are Puka Nakua and Devontae Adams. Like, I don't really want to be fading that, against anyone at any number at this point. So yeah, if you can get a 2.5 at a decent price, like I think that's probably the side that I would lean to. And again, like that's with a ton of respect for Seattle and what they've done so far, because I think they're a wagon as well. And that's why I reference. I think these are the 2 best teams in the NFC.
Yeah. I think the big part to me is that you look at the Rams, and as much credit as Matthew Stafford is getting for what he's doing with the offense, and they've been really good, I still think their defense is very underrated, right? And maybe because it doesn't have like the flashy names on it, even though Verse, I guess, Verse probably the biggest name, I guess, but I think it's still such a well-rounded team that we just keep focusing. And when I say we, I'm talking like the collective
human beings
machine that follows the NFL, right? Talk about Matthew Stafford and Puka, obviously, but I think they have a really good defense. And then on the flip side, it almost is the same thing with the Seahawks, where we keep talking about how great Sam Darnold has been. But guess what? They have a really good defense as well that's doing a really good job. And I don't even think Sam Darnold did much last week. Like he had maybe like 12. Like he didn't throw the ball that much. I mean, not that they had to, but you know what I mean? Like wasn't that much of a focal point. These are 2 really good teams. And to further your point about how good these teams are in the NFC, those are the kinds of teams that win in the playoffs. It's about defense in the playoffs, right? And it's about making not a lot of mistakes. And Sam Darnold has found a way to minimize his mistakes. And Matthew Stafford is a vet. He just doesn't really make too many mistakes. So I don't know. These 2 teams, I'm right there with you in terms of believing these are 2 of the top teams in the NFC that don't get the headlines as, the Lions do, the Packers, which we'll get to them eventually for sure in terms of what do we say? Well, we'll save that for when we get to the Packers. But you know what I mean? We talk about the Packers, you talk about the Lions, talk about the Eagles, obviously. And it's like, haven't really seen those performances from those teams that are inspiring. Like we're the Super Bowl favorites, put some respect on our names, I don't know. Super interesting stuff.
Yeah. One thing and I don't know if anybody's gonna be able to see this. I'm gonna try this anyway because I think it's just funny. You chart out and take off, say, the first 5 weeks and just go with the last like 4 or 5 weeks. This is the chart with the like EPA per play defensively for people out there. See this graph? Wait, move it this way. You see how like there's just one team way off to the side here? Right there. Just like on its own. And there's also kind of one team up at the top here. That's the Seahawks and the Rams defense. So all of these other teams, I love the people on YouTube I love the people that aren't on YouTube that don't get to see this. These are all like the teams doing regular stuff on defense we're talking about. That's the Seahawks. That's the Rams way out there. Like that's the outlier type defensive performance. Again, it's 4 or 5 weeks, but it's like the Rams out here defensively are like breaking the graph, right? Like they're forcing everybody else into that bottom left side because like we're just running out of room to put the Rams defense. And to me, like if I was to sort of say there might be a bad game coming from Sam Darnold, that would be the indication, and that is their drop back EPA per play allowed, right? That is the Rams pass defense. You know, the higher up it goes, the better the run defense. That's where the Seahawks were way up at the top. And again, they sort of have, you know, a relatively mediocre pass defense as much as we like the secondary for the Seahawks. So yeah, like the fact that the Rams over the last 4 or 5 weeks, without even talking about the offense, the defense is like requiring the chart to be bigger than we ever thought possible. It is, you know, just affirms your point about like, yeah, this Rams team, like the defense is really good as well. And as much as Stafford's out here, like I said, vibing his face off, the defense is pulling up in a pretty big way as well.
Pro room almost fell asleep there and didn't realize that the other camera was not on the screen.
I'll just ride out this one shot all day long. Try to stop me. You want more graphs? I'll hit you with more graphs. We can get into charts and graphs if you want.
Oh man, it's like so. Yeah, what were we talking about there? What are we doing here? What's happening? Yeah, great game. Looking forward to that one for sure. There's a slew of other like very interesting games as well, and I think that our next one with the Buffalo Bills is 5.5-point favorites hosting the Tampa Bay Bucs is another big boy matchup, as I like to say. The Bucs. I mean, it was a tough outing for them against the Pats. I thought they played really well at certain points. You know, Baker is, I don't know if Baker's banged up, but we're not seeing the scrambling Baker as much, you know, that like gotta have it play type Baker, which listen, you can't play like that all season, but they still did enough to keep that game close against a team that we've just told you, the Patriots, we think are really good. So now you follow that up. They stay in the AFC East against the Buffalo Bills, who, as mentioned, got blown out in Miami against the Dolphins. My one question for you is and it's an unanswerable question. So that's the
challenge accepted. Challenge accepted.
Was last week about Miami in terms of the Dolphins or Miami in terms of South Beach and Club Live and the Buffalo Bills having a good time? Could that have maybe played a factor? Like how much am I supposed to overreact to Buffalo's play against Miami? Or was there trends before the Miami game that showed us there might be some cracks in the armor here from the Buffalo Bills? Either way, I'm on Tampa Bay because you're giving me 5.5 points in a game in which I think these two teams are probably a lot closer than advertised. I feel like the Bills are talked about, these like dominating AFC team that's Super Bowl favorites, blah, blah, blah. And I just think the Bucs are pretty good too. So if you're giving me 5.5 points, I'm going to take the 5.5 points.
Okay. So let's start with sort of the narrative stuff that we can easily sort of touch on, right? Club Live, yeah. Club Live, you know, yeah, like this isn't the NBA shell. This isn't even the NHL where it's like we got a little too much time on our hands and it's one game out of 82 and like we kind of let that go. But I think sort of fundamentally, right, like betting on a team, asking them to do, whether it's asking them to cover 9.5, 9 points, or whether it's asking them to win at the percentage level that they should relative to that money line, or trusting them in Survivor after they win their biggest game of the season and then go to Miami, whether they're in a club or whether they're on the beach or they're doing anything or just being happy to be in warm weather, is this thing where you're sort of putting peril into your own hands there,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like, yeah, they wouldn't be, it used to be the Patriots. Be like, the Patriots lost in Miami? Like, what the heck happened? And it's like, yeah, because like, it kind of felt like a mini vacation against a team that they thought they could kind of just show up and beat. But, some of the things that like we didn't factor in as a general society is two really important secondary pieces for the Bills: Christian Benford and Taron Johnson. Taron Johnson missed the game before that, were out. And so now you're relying on Cam Lewis, the illustrious Cam Lewis, and things like Jamarcus Ingram and Jordan Hancock to play snaps for the Bills against the Dolphins, pass offense that does have some weapons and does have some ability. And all of a sudden, Jalen Waddle has a nice game, and Devon Achane catches some passes, along with the obviously run defense issue that we talked about earlier. And to me, from an on the field standpoint, again, the matchup, right? Like, what do we talk about when it comes to the Bills? Like, I don't want to be dealing, and the Bills admit it. They're like, we're built to beat the Chiefs. If you're going to have Patrick Mahomes drop back 40 times, and every time he hands the ball off, it's a good thing for us because it's Kareem Hunt, and we don't really think he's going to do anything. And it's Isaiah Pacheco, who doesn't, seems like he's doing more because he runs really hard, but never actually goes anywhere from like an efficiency standpoint. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, that's how we're built. And so it's like, it's going to suck if they play the Ravens in the playoffs. Like, honestly, the Bills' route to the Super Bowl like kind of only works if they don't play the Ravens, even though of course they beat the Ravens last year. Obviously, part of that had to do with home field advantage and the cold and yada yada yada. So who are the Buccaneers? So if the Dolphins are sort of the poor man's version of the Ravens, from like we want to run the football, we can get you via the run, who are the Buccaneers? The Buccaneers are the poor man's Kansas City Chiefs, where it's Patrick Mahomes, he's getting loose, it's third down, he's running around. Who does that sound like? Baker Mayfield. It's third down. He's running around like da, da, da. And word on the street is like there's an oblique issue with Baker, which maybe is the thing that's kept him from, getting out of some of the grasps that he's gotten tackled by these last couple of weeks. And, you mentioned like the idea of the Buccaneers being this good team. And like, yeah, if they were at full strength, maybe that would be the case. But I still can't shake, obviously last week, but I can't shake the Saints game the week before that, where nobody's watching Buccaneers Saints, and you look up and they've won 23-3. And it's like, yep, that's Buccaneers football. Like, they're back. You watch that game, you're like, this Buccaneers team is not playing particularly well. They are just being super. They're just taking advantage really, really well of the turnovers that the Saints were putting down in that game, right? The Spencer Rattler pick six and a couple of different fumbles. And just because the bye week came and went didn't really fix anything. Like, Mike Evans was never coming back. Jalen McMillan's still not coming back. And then Bucky Irving has been this lingering issue that has made him questionable every week since, as far back as I can remember as a human being. It doesn't appear that he's going to be coming back anytime soon, because every week, listen, they've already basically ruled him out as of like Monday or Tuesday this week. Like, it's a really bad sign that this shoulder injury for Bucky Irving is not going away. And so I don't, with Rachaad White back there just running into the line, like, they're not doing the thing that is going to beat the Bills on the football field. Go back to sort of narrative town here and be like, yeah, it's a Florida team coming up to play in Buffalo in the cold. How well is that necessarily going to go? Shell, you're fully aware of the current weather setup generally in this part of North America. Again, I don't know in the cold how much that's going to really work for the Buccaneers, who, by the way, like, again, were pretty systematically beat at home by the Patriots last week. And so if you can get beat at home by the Patriots, not that the Patriots are, I'm not besmirching the good name of the Patriots, then you can go on the road in Buffalo against a Buffalo Bills team that, historically speaking, yes, sometimes they have these let-ups after they get the big win. But you know what they also do? They also come back usually the next week after a pretty embarrassing loss. You and I always talk about, right, what's the biggest motivator in the NFL? Embarrassment. And they usually come back and they play their best game. So again, if Drake May and Travion Henderson can do it, I think Josh Allen and James Cook can do it. Obviously we always kind of talk about like the run defense for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That didn't seem to really be working out, as Travion Henderson's like gassing it up and down the field against the Bucs last
and also
week.
having time to stop and look at the bench to be like, should I score or do I go down? It's
That's
like,
right.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, and even if the hand it off up the middle move like isn't working because Vita Vea is just swallowing dudes whole,
Mhm.
like throw it to James Cook. Think this could be a good throw it to James Cook type of a game. Get him on the outside, matched up against some of these older, more veteran players
Mhm.
in the back seven, if you will, for the Buccaneers. I love the Bills this week. This is so far like my best sort of look this entire week, because I think also, there's a value element to this where the Buccaneers are still being rated as this above average team. And basically for the last 3 games,
Yeah,
going
even
back to the
before the
Detroit
bye.
Monday
Yeah.
night game.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I mentioned the Saints game. And then in last week, it's like, well, hang on a sec. Like, why is this team rated the same as some of these other teams that I think are sort of
Interesting.
properly rated as slightly above average? Again, you throw in a potential sort of injury here to Mayfield that's making him a little bit less. We need to kind of invent a word here, right? Like scrambleable, right? Like, that he's able to sort of scramble out of these situations. Yeah, I think this is a spot where the Bills could have sort of a quote unquote surprisingly nice victory because, at first blush, I kind of look at it like you, where it's like, oh, this might be an underdog play. We just saw the Bills lose. What do we talk about all the time, right? Like turnovers. If you've turned the ball over a lot the week before, like that's going to help the other team, but it doesn't mean you're going to do it again this week.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think you're going to get that buttoned up, effort from the Bills. Maybe they still think they can kind of catch the Patriots for the division. And if they don't think that, then by the way, like I'd be looking around going like, are we positive we can get in here as a wild card when you got 3 teams out of the AFC West that are absolutely, seen, and
Yeah.
the Ravens, I think, probably win that division over there. Meanwhile, you got the Steelers already with a still above 500 record. Joe
Mhm.
Burrow's music may be playing off in the distance if the Bengals could possibly win a game, this week without him. And then obviously you've got the sort of concept of maybe there's a second team that could buck their heads a little bit in the AFC South. Like I don't think it's some guarantee that the Bills make the playoffs. I think they know that, and I think you're going to get the best effort possible here from the Bills, and I think that's enough to cover 5.5.
That, my friends, is the gong, which means the pick
Still
has
don't hear
been
it.
changed. The people hear it. I'm getting messages every week. The
I
people can
know.
hear it.
I
Big
know.
shouts to the
I
people
don't know
at
why.
home. Let me know the
It's a
gong is
great bit.
working. The pick is
It's a
working.
great bit.
The pick switches have been working. Bills minus 5.5. Everything you said on top of the fact that it is a fact. There is no South Beach and there is no Club Live in Buffalo, so they will be more buttoned down this week and more
It's a
focused.
guy's basement.
Ready to go. Yeah. What is the equivalent to Club Live in Buffalo?
Club Len. It's just a guy named Len who's got a basement and he just has a sign that says South Beach.
What is it?
And it
Club
just kind of
Anchor Bar?
flickers. Yeah. Oh, listen, if you want some wings, if you want to get loose,
Let's go.
wing style, different kind of loose, but whatever.
Champagne
Non-Ibiza edition.
Champagne
You can go
room
to
looks a little
Spain
different.
or you can go to the Anchor Bar.
Anchor Bar, right?
Yeah.
Little different.
Yeah.
We keep it going though. We go to Minnesota. The Vikings, 3-point favorites, hosting the Bears. I'm on the Bears +3 here. A weird one though, a very weird one. And I will say this, not as confident in this one, but we'll start here. Caleb made the plays down the stretch. They won the game.
Yeah.
Somehow the Bears look up and they're 6-3 on the season, which I know doesn't really matter much to us here based on what we do, but it was still interesting fact. I was like, oh, Bears are 6-3. Cool. But
yeah,
I look at last week's game and I think, hey, great job, Bears. But then you think Jackson Dart got hurt.
Great job, Bears.
Great job, Bears, right? But Jackson Dart got hurt. So it was against Russ down the stretch.
Yeah.
But still, they won the game. And on the flip side, the Vikings did not look well at all. I don't know why they thought it'd be a good idea to have JJ McCarthy throw the ball like 40 times. Odd move, but okay, cool. I'm on the Bears here because I'm getting 3 points. But I will say, the Vikings defense versus Caleb Williams makes me very nervous. Very nervous. That's the biggest thing that makes me nervous here. But I'm on the Bears +3. That's where I'm sitting here. Giving me 3 points to gobble it up.
It's a fascinating game because the Bears win, as you mentioned, and you're right. Like, I love that you said it because it's true, and I don't think people understand it the way that maybe they should. We really do not care about records because like
No.
records will lie to you. And
Yeah.
so I just, as everybody knows, they listens to this, like we track team rating
Yeah.
because the betting market is the only thing that matters to us with regards to how a team is perceived. Now, again, you could say, well, they're 6-3, and so they've probably been profitable over the course of this season because they are still, by the way, rated as a below average team. And you're like, well, how can a below average team be 6-3? But then you go back and you look at all the results and you go like, yeah, I
And
guess
you look at
that
who they
is
play.
true because I'm watching the Ben Johnson like thing in the locker room after the game. And he's just like, you guys just keep doing it. I'm like, da, 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 da. I'm like, keep doing what? I'm like, oh my God, they keep winning. What? Like I'm sure, right? Because it's like, yeah, it didn't feel like this was some sort of like 6-3 powerhouse where they're like escaping Cincinnati with a win, or it's like that home game against the Saints before that. You're like, yeah, of course they won that game. They're playing the Saints at home. Like, what do we think was going to happen there? And like they escaped that Washington game on Monday Night Football a couple. So every time we watch them, it's like, I don't. This is not a 66% win percentage team, and therefore this is not a 66 out of 100 rated team. And they're not. They are, again, they win that game, and the point is that like they win that game and they don't move from a market rating perspective, right? Meanwhile, Minnesota loses that game last week, and their actual market rating moved up. They got actual credit for the way that they played in that game. And you mentioned the JJ McCarthy throwing situation. They just got into a situation because, frankly, their kick returner fumbled a football where they were in down. They give up a field goal. They go down 2 points. Their kick returner fumbles the football, gives the Ravens a 20-yard field. The Ravens convert on that. And it was 12-10 at that point, which, quick mathematics would tell us that the Ravens were having trouble converting and scoring touchdowns, right? Not being able to do the full 80, 75, 60-yard drive in order to score against the Vikings defense. So you get a 20-yard field and you're able to convert that, and all of a sudden the Vikings are down 9. It was this crucial play. Meanwhile, by the way, the kick returner literally fumbled on the very next kickoff, and luckily for the Vikings, they were able to hang on. But of course, the game ends with an 8-point loss. It's like, well, that's 7 points that you gave up, and who knows? Like a drive could have resulted in a punt, and the Ravens could have scored a touchdown on the next drive. We'll never know. But like to go from being up 10-9 to all of a sudden down more than a score is then going to make you kind of go, all right, we need to start throwing the football here a ton. Now, my concern is that McCarthy and Justin Jefferson are not connecting. And I think some of that's on McCarthy, but some of that's on Jefferson. He is not playing particularly well. Like he is going down a little bit easier. He is losing 50, quote unquote, 50-50 battles. And of course, a wide receiver of his ilk will tell you it's not a 50-50 battle. It's 80-20 or like whatever sort of 90-10 or whatever. And it's like with Justin Jefferson so far this season, it has not been 80-20. So I don't know what's going on necessarily there, but I think there is some sort of indicator here where because the market isn't buying into the Bears, we either can disagree with that or agree with that. And I'm just having a tendency, because of how surprised I am that they're 6-3, to honestly kind of just agree with it and be like, yeah, I think they are still kind of just this below average team. And when it comes to the Vikings, like they got downgraded before that game against the Lions to a below average team. But the Vikings coming into this season and largely throughout the season have been considered an average team. And so they go and they get downgraded for that game. They win in Detroit, again, just 2 weeks ago. And I would tell you that, like, with a couple of different bounces, maybe they have a chance to beat the Ravens last week, which would then turn everything upside down with regards to how people feel about the Ravens and so on and so forth. So I actually do think that it's an appropriately rated team here with the Vikings, and they just kind of got unlucky and had some really not even secondary or tertiary players have too much of an effect on the game. I'm looking at the kick returner in this case. So again, I think that the Vikings can move the ball against the Bears defense at home.
Mhm.
We've seen the Vikings, and listen, a lot of this was sort of the Justin Fields era, but even last year against Caleb Williams, Brian Flores, the defense, giving Caleb Williams trouble. Again, that wasn't Ben Johnson. But again, I still think this thing isn't fully cooked when it comes to the Bears offense, right? It's not ready to come out of the oven, even though they have to play football games. So, it's not the best bet on earth because, there is a possibility that maybe the Bears are at least an average team and that getting 3 points here is, something that's appealing. But like, again, right up until the point where you're watching the game and going like the Bears offense can't do anything in the din of Minnesota, the crowd noise, et cetera, having just watched how well they handled the Ravens, which again, 1 o'clock game, people are watching all kinds of different games. Maybe they're not really realizing how well the defense is handling the Ravens right up until the point where the Ravens had a 20-yard field. And it's like if you can handle the Ravens offense, I think you can handle the Bears offense at home here as well. So again, I think the Vikings are still, this isn't a team this deep into the season where they are out of the playoffs and like everybody's kind of got like a who cares attitude. I think there's still very much a care attitude. And to me, that's credit to Kevin O'Connell and being able to sort of go like, yeah, we're still building here. We're still building here. An outside chance, maybe grab a wild card. If we get hot down the stretch here, win some of these home games that we have. So, again, I still think you're getting full effort out of the Vikings. And I still think the Vikings are the better team, despite the record sort of saying otherwise.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a interesting one there. The Vikings and JJ McCarthy continue to be a work in progress, but I do think you're right in terms of the infrastructure around him for sure is pretty good, right? So I think that's a big part of their whole operation there. We move on to the Titans hosting the Texans. Texans on the road laying 7 points. And I know this sounds funny because right there it says Houston -7. Sheldon says Houston -7. Laying 7 points on the road. That's a tough one. And it could only be against the Tennessee Titans. So my question here is how much does a bye week help a team as bad as the Tennessee Titans? Because that's got to be the question here, right? Tennessee coming out against a defense that the Texans have that I think is really good. One of the better defenses in the league. And I mean, I look at that game last week and Davis Mills somehow comes back on a crazy, 19-point fourth quarter deficit.
Yeah. My guy, Davis Mills.
Right. Depending on what you had that number at last week. I know when we recorded the pod, it was Houston -1.5. And that last second play, when we recorded last week, it was Houston -1.5. And so for those scoring at home, if you pay attention to how that game ended last week with the Texans up 1 point, and then Trevor Lawrence only doing something that Trevor Lawrence could possibly do in terms of, was that ruled a fumble, an interception? I don't even know what that was, but
it was a fumble. I think it was. Yeah.
Dude ends up taking it house and a cover. Everyone goes home happy except Trevor Lawrence. But I say all that to say, my biggest question still remains: Titans off a bye week. Do they improve coming off a bye week with their new coach?
Okay, so that's definitely the Titans question. I think the Houston stuff's actually a little bit more interesting. Let's touch on the Titans real quick. Right? Headline. Well, let's. What do we want first? Let's answer
all my questions.
I'll start the headline here, Shell. You want to have me derail this whole deal? I kind of think the Titans win this game. I kind of think the Titans win this game this week.
What are you doing to me here, man? What are you doing to me?
I kind of do. And listen, so part of it is, right, obviously we start with like the rating and they're down in the Mendoza line. They would not be in contention for Fernando Mendoza. So, they're still trying to win football games because they've already got their quote unquote quarterback of the future. And anytime is valuable time or should be valuable time for said quote unquote quarterback of the future. And now the problem with Cam Ward hasn't been sort of his ability to throw the ball or maybe get the ball downfield. It's been sort of the sloppiness and honestly, for lack of a better term, like Will Levis-y type of plays where the ball just comes flying out of his hand when no one really touches it. And you're just like, well, that was 7 points you just donated when you don't really have the room to maneuver to just be handing out 7 points because you're largely a bad team. I look at the roster on the Titans and I still don't really understand how they are this bad, particularly if they are a little bit more healthy. And that's sort of from a defensive standpoint. Obviously offensively, it's like the more time Cam Ward has to sort of get reps, even just practice reps, the better. But also the more time that we get, if we can get to Jeffrey Simmons back in the lineup, we can get Arden Key back in the lineup, and we can get Xavier Woods, the free safety, back in the lineup for the Titans, the better off that they're necessarily going to be. And so again, like I look up and down even the offensive line, like with veterans like Dan Moore and like JC Latham, obviously a top pick from a couple of years ago, you're like, why isn't this team just functional, right? And again, you mentioned the coaching change and the quote unquote new coach. And it's like, yeah, I don't really care about the new coach. It was more about like, let's get the old coach out of there, because Callahan, I think, was like a minus EV scenario on this team. And that was literally on a game to game basis with regards to decision making. That wasn't even the sort of macro, like he's just not a good head coach from like a structural perspective. He was literally didn't know the rules and was making honestly stuff up out on the field that we've just kind of never seen before. And so again, like not having him in the rooms during the bye week, I think is actually sort of leading to a potential improvement for the Titans here. Now let's get to the Texans situation. So you didn't ask because it seems like it's already a high number and that it's a CJ Stroud number, but it's actually not.
Okay.
The CJ Stroud number would be like 8.5 for this game.
Yeah.
And the fascinating part from the Texans standpoint is like part of the reasons we were on the Texans last week, and I didn't realize that on the show it was -1.5. That makes it even funnier that they ended up sort of covering, because like I had money line, I had +1.5 and all that sort of thing. So I I'll put it this way: there's a possibility, and this is my own personal opinion, because I don't really think that highly of CJ Stroud. I think the Davis Mills CJ Stroud thing could be very much similar to your guys, Brock Purdy and Mac Jones, the Arizona crew with Kyler Murray and Jacoby Brissett, where it's like we paid all this money for this guy, but like when the backup is in, there might not be that much of a downgrade from a win probability perspective, right? And we can get into why I like Davis Mills a little bit more than most people think, but the reality is Davis Mills had to play for 2 seasons amidst the whole Deshaun Watson suspension fiasco, and that led to CJ Stroud getting drafted because Davis Mills was a rookie and second-year player when he had to play, and he wasn't of the pedigree of a first-round pick. And so you put a guy and keep a guy for a reason, because you think he's actually pretty valuable from a backup quarterback perspective. He's probably one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league, and I think he got a chance to show that, even though that team was down 17-0, not because of Davis Mills, because basically everybody else on the team really refused to show up in that game. So all that is to say, like, if Davis Mills is in this game, I am going to, because the market is going to then react to it, and they're going to drop this line to like 4, and I'm going to be like, man, there's actually probably some value on the Texans in that situation. But from a setup standpoint, where, you mentioned the jump and hug game, and to me that always means like we pulled a game out of our backsides.
Yeah.
And like, oh my God, we won. Like that was a jump and hug game last week, right? Where the Texans pulled that off. But it also shows that like in a division game at home, as a collective, they can just no-show the first quarter. Like they're capable of that. And if I'm D'Amico Ryans or anybody looking to back the Texans going forward, like that's terrifying to me, because that should have been a game, knowing that they didn't have Stroud, that they're like, all right, everybody else has to go up 5% here. And that didn't really happen until they got down 17-0. And so I look at it and I go, whether it's Stroud here and we get 8, or we're just kind of guessing at 7, or we're going to get a little bit lower of a number here, I want to just kind of lock in 7 or 7.5 with the Titans, and then if Stroud plays, so be it. And if we miss out on 8 or 8.5, like cool, because I don't trust the Texans to like be up 4 games. Not obviously the ones that like are coin flip type games, but like a game on the road against a team that they think they can beat, or that they should beat, like, ugh, like not my. And you and I have always talked about that, and probably more than any other entity or place or show, that first game when the Titans went to the Texans and we had the Texans in Survivor, and sweating that first 3 quarters and being like, this Titans team, if the kicker could make a kick, might have a little something here. And we got, kind of bailed out by them not being able to make a kick. And then of course the Texans, pull away in the fourth quarter. Flip locations, and if we have the same sort of first 3 quarters with literally anybody being a better coach for the Titans, and again maybe 10 more weeks or whatever it is, 8 more weeks, 2 full months of experience, reps, etc. for Cam Ward, and by the way, some of the offensive weapons, the Chimere DKs of the world, right? And like having both running backs in there as well, and it's just like, man, you could sell me on the idea of this being another close game through 3 quarters, and then again, maybe it depends on who the quarterback is for the Texans. I don't think it really does. there's a possibility here that the Titans, you want to talk division rival or whatever, like the Titans might think that they can beat the Texans because of how closely they played them the first time around in Houston. So I think it's a tough spot for the Texans to get up for the first quarter. And I think once this game is potentially close at halftime, which a lot of Titans games have been close at halftime,
Yep.
this might be the one where the Titans actually finish for a full 60 minutes. Maybe that's because they're a little more rested because of the bye. Maybe it's because they don't have Callahan just repeatedly making minus EV decisions. But that's what I'm saying, man. I think from a money line perspective here, and the percentage chances of that potentially happening, I think are a little bit better than the money line suggests. Switcheroo.
Did you hear your timing there? It's like you heard the gong there. But
I know I wait like half a beat, and if there's silence, I'm like, he's doing it, he's gonging, and so then I pretend that I know that I pretend that I can hear it.
Let's go. So Tennessee Titans +7 pick has been switched here, and in a weird way, I'm going to say something, and I know that you say it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. I feel like CJ Stroud just isn't that good. I don't know.
And I think it's
you
not
know what I
doesn't
mean?
matter. It matters less than the market thinks, because if they use the Davis Mills, if they use the Davis Mills rating, like the Texans rating with Davis Mills from last week, this line would be like 3.
Yeah.
Which is why we were on the Texans last week, because I'm like, that's too low of an adjustment from Stroud to Mills, because there's been too many times this season where I just watched Stroud play and I'm like, I'm not sure this guy's any good. And so if I'm not sure he's any good, and I think Mills might be a little bit better or a lot better than the market thinks, then there's going to be a tinier gap. And we've done pretty well picking our spots with Brissett and Mac Jones and some of these other deals where it's like, are you sure you should have spent that much money on this quarterback when again, there's no way to know that developing a quarterback for 5 years, which Davis Mills is on year 5 or year 6.
Yeah.
It's not like teams do that. There wasn't really a way that they could kind of work around it. And maybe the best scenario for them is we'll pay CJ Stroud a lot of money. We won't pay Davis Mills a lot of money. And, we'll get essentially the same quarterback play either way. And if Davis Mills is okay with that, then cool.
No, definitely makes sense. We will continue on here with the Green Bay Packers, who is 7-point favorites on the road in New York to take on the Giants. Jackson Dart, he looked good last week until he then went down because it was inevitable with the style of play, as we talked about on this pod last week and the week before and the week before that. So he's gone. Daboll's gone, as we also talked about weeks ago on this pod. Rumor has it we could be seeing Jameis Winston.
Not even a rumor.
Let's go.
Not even a rumor anymore.
Let's go. Jameis getting the start here. I mean, listen, I'm on the Packers -7, but I can't lie to you. Of course, it's all looking right there for me to switch sides and go towards, the man, the myth, the legend that is Jameis +7 points at home. My issue, though, is who are they throwing to? Who's running the ball? Who's doing anything? Yeah. And this isn't even about the Packers, because to me, the Packers continue to look not that good, right? We're still waiting for the Packers to be the team where, what did I say last week? The Packers are the team that we're told is good versus the team that we've seen be this Super Bowl favorite. So
that resonated with me. Yeah,
I get it, but they definitely didn't do much to change that narrative the last time we saw them, right, against the Eagles. So I understand, but there's just not enough here for me to roll with Jameis and company. That's how I feel at this point.
Yeah, so the rumor that's become true is that Jameis is at the very least the number 2. So he's replacing Russell Wilson as the number 2. And this is as of Wednesday morning. He's replacing Russell Wilson as the number 2. And if Jackson Dart cannot play, he would then be the guy to start this game. And so we are now waiting to find out of I think, what's the number, 5 times that Jackson Dart has been evaluated for a concussion this season, right? Which I don't know what the comp is there, but if you've been evaluated that many times, 5 evaluations should probably just equal 1 concussion, even if scientifically that's not necessarily all that strong information. Okay, so Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think you need to know which guy it is. I would start by saying, like, if it's Dart, this number still puts the Packers in that group, right? Ravens, Colts, slightly behind the Eagles now that the Eagles have won that game, Bills, Lions, right? All of those teams in like the mid to high 60s from our estimated market rating perspective. And like you said, like I kind of I'm having a hard time agreeing with it the more that we watch the Packers. And again, I have Packers division futures from before the season, before the Micah Parsons trade, that all looked very valuable when the season started. So like I want the Packers to be good, and it's just like again, we just keep not really seeing it in a way that everybody would kind of hope for. And so from the Packers perspective, like we're gonna need some of these receivers back. Romeo Dobbs left that game last week. He's gonna need to play. We're gonna need Matthew Golden back to play here for anybody to really be that interested in the Packers. But if Winston, wow, that was hard for me to say. Maybe it's because we normally just yell Jameis at the top of our lungs. If he plays, like, what does Jameis Winston do? Jameis Winston throws variance into like the paper shredder, right? Like variance just goes nuts. And so it makes the Giants more likely to get blown out by 3 touchdowns. It also makes the Giants more likely to win because he is going to huck the ball around with reckless abandon. And if it works, everybody gets super pumped about Jameis and underdogs win. And if it doesn't work, which by the way, most often it doesn't work, because that's why Jameis Winston was the third quarterback on a team that has Russell Wilson. Um, yeah, so it's more likely that the Packers are going to win this game by a significant margin. Is it more likely that the Giants win this game than the money line suggests? I think that's also true, right? And so I don't know that this is going to be, oh, Giants lost a close one, because anytime the Giants are kind of in, or a Jameis Winston quarterback team is in a close one, things get out of hand in fourth quarter one way or another because Jameis Winston's willing to fire that ball around the stadium. So again, like that's not really giving you that much here other than the idea of like if Jameis Winston plays in this game and the Giants get downgraded and the money line becomes juicier for the Giants, then I think they need to be included in the possibility of a round robin underdog money line parlay on the possibility that on a short week with travel, with some of these injuries that the Packers have, that like haven't been sussed out in a positive way just yet, right? Like the Packers are -7 with injury issues. Like if they get guys back and Jameis is the quarterback, we might be headed to like 9 or 10. And it's like, yeah, they might lose by 21. They also might just win because Jameis Winston does some crazy stuff out there.
Stranger things have happened for sure with Jameis at the helm, right? So totally understand where you're coming from there. And the Packers, hey, at any point you want to show up and be the team we're told that you are. We'll be waiting. Next game, Chargers -3 in Jacksonville taking on said Jaguars. Pathetic loss, as just mentioned, by the Jags, blowing a 19-point fourth quarter lead to Davis Mills and company. Meanwhile, the Chargers, pretty solid Sunday night versus the Steelers. I don't know why I had the Packers written down here, probably because it's Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, very interesting game. Chargers with the win, just a professional performance in terms of we're just better than you. This game is going to be close. Aaron Rodgers just looked washed. Like that's what it is. Here's the thing.
Okay.
I'm on the -3 with the Chargers here. Tempted to take the Jags just because home dogs, but I don't really trust much from the Jaguars operation. It's tough. If there was an ask here, I get it. Taking points, home dog. I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I just have trouble with it.
That's totally fine. Again, like at this point in the season, and again, maybe it's the requirement of 10 weeks to sort of understand. You mentioned like who's a professional outfit, right? And we do the thing every week where we look at different injuries, and again, there's gonna be some games where like the decision making comes down to like what availability of different players are like. And of course, the Joe Alt thing, like this is one where there's a certain point where a guy, whether it's a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman, gets so talked about in the mainstream, ESPN shows, the ones that are on at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, where you're just like, all right, like the guy's important, but like if you clowns are talking about it as much as you guys are talking about it, then like I think we might be over selling the point here because they are going to be allowed to play a player in that person's steed. This is not going to be a 10 versus 11 game. And, coaches are well aware that they don't have Joe Alt and they don't, they have kind of a bum offensive line situation. And if you're a good team with a good head coach, like, oh, I don't know, Jim Harbaugh, then whose whole life is based on like keeping his quarterback upright because he knows that Justin Herbert is sick. Right? Anybody who watches Justin Herbert throw the football, you listen to Tirico and Collinsworth talk about them just being like, it's like nothing else. Like watching Justin Herbert in practice, just zipping balls around. It's like, yeah, if we watch Justin Herbert for like any amount of time, you just go like, nobody throws the ball like this guy. It's on a line 40 yards down the field. Now he has to have time for his receivers to get down there. And that's the bummer about this whole thing because we don't get to see peak Justin Herbert finding Quentin Johnston on like crossing route post like type deals like 30 yards down the field. Instead, the Chargers have had to do the thing where it's like, let's run the football. Let's like make sure that we get the ball in guys' hands quickly. And like they did that to perfection. By the way, the defense continues to be this like no-name group by and large. I mean, obviously you got your Khalil Max and some of these other players, Derwin James, of course, but like they just don't give up touchdowns. Like, okay, like you're going to win a lot of games if you just do not give up touchdowns in the NFL. That's what a lot of defenses are designed to like give you some yards, let you kick your 50-yard field goal, maybe you make one, maybe you don't, but like you're not scoring touchdowns, it's going to be hard for you to win. And so now you see this collective of the Chargers as a unit doing the thing that we hope the Texans do, for example, right? When CJ Stroud isn't playing and everybody else plays better from the start. So it's not the quarterback injury, it's the offensive line injury that is going to potentially hurt the quarterback. But like they've buttoned up, right? It's 10 weeks of figuring out who the buttoned up team is that more often than not is going to exceed their expectation because we're expecting and hoping in this fantasy football world, flashy, high scoring, all kinds of like fantasy football points, when in reality, we're just looking for teams to beat the other team. And how you beat the other team in the NFL is just play, again, buttoned up and like, don't false start 8 times. Speaking of the Minnesota Vikings, right? Like that's how they lose that game. Don't leave your backup tackles on an island against premier pass rushers.
Yeah.
Run the football, throw it quick, roll out your quarter, stuff like this. That's workarounds. You can work around most things. And if you just decide not to work around it, you're going to be in trouble. And so like the Jags almost won that game and should of course won that game. But like I would have downgraded the Jags had they won that game last week. Because again, like, you're playing from ahead 17-0 in like the first like 10 minutes of that game. And you can't do anything offensively. The wide receiver group is grim without Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter. The run game is starting to fall off a little bit after like the guru of offense, Liam Cohen, like changed the way that the Jaguars play offensively. And it's like, well, everybody's kind of caught up to that. So the Jags don't get that much pressure. They somehow turn teams over. But again, I trust the Chargers not to turn the ball over. Again, maybe they have an outlier performance. We've seen that playoffs last year where the Chargers had a bunch of turnovers. It's been something of an outlier with Herbert, who's had 8 interceptions this season. I think he had like 2 all of last year. Again, I trust the Chargers to be buttoned up, and I don't trust the Jaguars to be buttoned up. So again, the home road thing doesn't really matter when it comes to the Chargers, again, because they're a professional outfit. And I don't think the home thing really matters for the Jaguars because I don't really think they have that great of a home field advantage.
Yeah, I think the crazy part about the lack of home field advantage is how much it impacts certain teams versus others. Like I know that sounds obvious, but I'm saying like you would think that it should be a bigger deal, but then you run into instances where you're just like, oh, yeah, no, not a thing at all. Not a thing at all. We keep it going though. We got the Bengals at the Steelers. Steelers at home. And laying 5.5 points are said Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think that is too many points for said Pittsburgh Steelers. But if we talk about Cincy coming off a bye, which I think is good for a team that needs to, kind of regroup and really make sure they get on a run here. But the other side of it is Aaron Rodgers struggled. He did not look good at all. Hasn't really looked good at all this season. And if we're talking about what could be, dare I say, a shootout, but I'm just saying a lot of points being scored here because the Bengals seem to be able to put up points even with Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers, this sounds like hyperbole, but does Aaron Rodgers look more washed than Joe Flacco? Do you know what I mean? Like Aaron Rodgers doesn't look good.
Oh, gotcha.
Right? Do you know what I mean? Gotcha. Like, Aaron Rodgers doesn't look good. And so we're talking about offenses, and I think the better offense is getting the 5.5 points here. That's why I'm on the Bengals.
Maybe not necessarily just this week. I think all the time, right? I think thematically, you don't want to be laying points with the bad defense, no matter how good the offense is. We'll get to one of those in a little bit too. You can work around a bad defense if you have an offense that I think is going to be able to score. And I just look at it like the Thursday night game with these two teams from like a month ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. And I go, why would this game be any different from that game? And it doesn't mean that the Bengals are going to win the game, though I will have a bet on that result. It just means that like last team to touch the ball wins here. And you mentioned the Flacco Rodgers like washed off situation. Joe Flacco had the athleticism at 25 that he does now. So like washed doesn't look all that different, right? Joe Flacco was always big arm Joe Flacco and like won a Super Bowl because he could throw the ball 50 yards down the field and get an offensive or a defensive pass interference or a long touchdown. And that's, people kind of that whole like Joe Flacco is the elite type of thing. It's like, I don't know how many defensive pass interferences did his team draw this past week to get these like 50-yard chunk plays. People forget that because it feels like it was a million years ago and, might as well have been. Whereas Rodgers at his absolute best was a guy whose athleticism, he wasn't Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson, but his athleticism in and around the pocket to like escape the pocket, throw from different arm angles. Like he was like, I don't want to say the first guy because somebody's going to be like Fran Tarkenton, but like, he was that dude who was like, I'm going to throw from like a crazy angle here. I'm going to run for 30 yards if you're not paying attention. All of the stuff that made Aaron Rodgers for the first 20 years of his career or whatever it was, like just doesn't exist anymore. And I think there was no more obvious deal than last week where he spins out of a throw before it's even really left his hand to Kenneth Gainwell down in the red zone, and it airmailed Gainwell, and it's entirely because Rodgers does not want to get hit. And so I think we might have talked about this before the season started, where it was like, you know what, as long as Aaron Rodgers and the vibes are high with regards to the Steelers, I don't want to be fading them. I don't know if I necessarily want to be betting on them either, but I don't want to be fading them. And then two things are going to happen, right? The vibes are going to get a little dicey if things don't necessarily go Rodgers' way. Here we are. And it's going to get cold. And now you've decided that you want to play in Pittsburgh outdoors. And the weather is all of a sudden in early, mid, I guess now, November, it's now starting to get cold. And so now we got 42, 43-year-old Aaron Rodgers out in the cold with, minimal vibes. Like even Mike Tomlin's like, I don't want to talk about the performance that we just saw from Rodgers indoors in California. So how much better could it possibly necessarily be? And so again, like the Bengals defense, I think, it doesn't seem like they're going to get Hendrickson back. They obviously traded Logan Wilson. I don't know if that really matters in the sort of grand scheme of things. The one thing I will sort of say, right? Like we always said it like 4 different times already on this podcast, embarrassment, right? Embarrassment is relative to pride. The fact that the offense was like, yo, get a stop. Like one stop, guys. Right? Like after the game, like multiple dudes were like just one stop. We're out here balling. Joe Flacco's slinging it, right? And had this like shoulder injury all week leading up to that game. He's like, I don't care, I'm going to play anyway. And people are like, hell yeah, Joe. And he throws for like 400 yards. And again, the weird thing is like he's probably, so to speak, like the best thing that they have going. Meanwhile, Joe Burrow, speaking of Joe's, stands up there with his practice window opening on this past Monday and literally cites the Steelers record and goes, yo, they're 5-4. And like he's like, normally the division isn't this wide open, But the Steelers are 5-4, literally the team that they're about to play. Now, he doesn't have to go out there this week to sort of back that up, and nor did he say anything super egregious, but just the idea in that locker room, they're looking at it coming off of this bye week, going, if we can beat the Steelers here, and Joe has been working his his toe off to get back, that they've already sort of circled week 13 against the Ravens on the calendar. Now, this doesn't mean that they're going to beat the Ravens or that they're going to make some run to the playoffs, because honestly, I don't think the team is good enough to necessarily do that. But it doesn't matter what I believe for this specific this game. It matters what they believe. And they have beaten the Steelers. They know that if they beat the Steelers, things tighten right up because their quarterback just says that it does. And that, like, no matter what happens in week 12, they at least have a chance going to Baltimore to win a game with Joe Burrow potentially back. And again, they could lose that game by 20 points and none of that matters. But the thing is, we don't have to go back in a time machine and tell the Bengals that they're not going to win that game on that. I believe it's either Thanksgiving night or Black Friday. I think it's Thanksgiving night. We don't have to tell them that they're not going to make the playoffs and that that's not going to happen, or even that Burrow doesn't actually make it back because he, sustains some sort of injury, re-injury to the toe, yada, yada, yada. But for this game and this game only, they believe that they can do it. I don't think the Steelers have that same belief in the quarterback, in the offense, and so on and so forth. So, again, you can do the thing where it's like, I don't think the Steelers should be favored by 5.5 points against anybody. I'd be down with that. I just know that, like, the Bengals are much better than some of these Mendoza line type teams, even if everybody looks at the defense and goes like, this team's brutal. Man, I agree with you. But at the same time here, like, the Steelers offense, are they capable of taking advantage of it? I think the Bears offense is capable of taking advantage of it. I mean, I still can't believe the Jets offense, frankly, took advantage of it a couple of weeks ago. So maybe the Steelers, offense can. I just think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with this Steelers record. We referenced the game against the Patriots where they took advantage of a bunch of turnovers. There was the Browns game where they took advantage of the Browns and that incredible rest disparity that they've had. And again, the vibes falling apart here. Cold weather, Raj, like, listen, man, you're going to have to put up 30 points to beat this Bengals team. They might let you do it, but to cover 6, you might need 40. And I just don't think the Steelers have that in the holster.
Right. I think that's a good call there for sure. The Steelers, I don't know what they have in their holster, but it's definitely not a lot of Aaron Rodgers touchdown passes, or at least it's not what I think.
Hopefully. Yeah.
All right. We'll move on though. Panthers at the Falcons. Falcons at home, laying 3.5 points. And yeah, last week, as mentioned, you did try to warn me. You did try to tell me, hey, what are you doing? Thinking that you could possibly lay 5.5 points with the Panthers. And boy, did I not listen. But I also did mock myself and say, hey, the time would come on Sunday when I looked up at the screen and just laughed at myself for being a complete moron. And yeah, that did happen on Sunday. It definitely did. Right. Now we have the Panthers taking on a Falcons team that lost in OT. They got carved by Jonathan Taylor last week, right? Just absolutely carved. 244 yards, 3 TDs, and still could have won the game if Michael Penix could have figured out a way to not be Michael Penix. I don't know how to put it. He just looks super shaky at times, and it's super weird. Yeah. Right? Like, I don't know. I find it strange. Here we are, though. I'm laying the 3.5 points with the Falcons, but this has more to do with the Panthers than it does with my disdain for what Michael Penix Jr. is doing at times, where, like, he just has, like, weird plays. Like, it just doesn't make sense. You have all the weapons around you, right? Like, just throw the 5-yard outs, hit your checkdowns. Like, this is not complicated.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because, I mean, first of all, like, listen, you go to literally the most neutrally site game you can find. I mean, like, Berlin. Like, they used to have a wall, and they knocked that thing down because they're like, we got to make this deal a little bit neutral. I think that's how history looks at the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was football related, of course. So they go and they play this neutral site game against this team that everybody loves, including myself, Jonathan Taylor. Like, stay healthy, my man. Yeah. And they were, I'm not going to say they had the game won, but like they were winning that game throughout. And the Penix thing is interesting. I think he's a really bad deep ball thrower. And I think that's the frustrating part because, like, he has a really strong arm. And again, it's mind's eye type stuff, right? Where I can remember him at Washington just drilling guys deep, but it was dudes who were wide open that he could just throw like a 35-yard pass, like on a line directly to, right? Whether it was Jalen McMillan, Roma Dunze, et cetera, et cetera. And so when he has to throw deep, it always looks bad. And you're like, what was that throw?
Yeah.
But he can throw these absolute seeds over the middle. And Drake London's making hands catches, like he leads the league in hands catches. I think we might have talked about that last week or weeks past. But he's unable to get like the ball to like the Darnell Moody's of the world, who it's like, yeah, just throw the ball with an arc. Like he needs to go to the Drake May school of like deep ball throwing.
Yes,
but he also has Kyle Pitts out there, and Kyle Pitts is infuriating because like there was an early drive when they had, I think they had the lead, where he like hits Pitts like in stride in the hands with one of these like, again, just full on like laundry line darts, and like Kyle Pitts drops it and they have to punt, and it's just like again, it's one drive, but like you only get basically 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so if like a guy drops a pass that would otherwise be like a 20-yard gain and halts the drive, that's 10% of your offensive opportunities, right? Like give or take, depending on how many there actually end up being. And so I was really frustrated with the play calling because I think you and I talked about the idea of DeForest Buckner not being in the game. I don't know if that had happened by Wednesday morning, but it might have been something that really just came out after that. And it was in my article for the window. But the Colts run defense over the course of history, so to speak, which they used to have a really, really good run defense. The metrics haven't been as good this year, but like they had Grover Cleveland and DeForest Buckner in the middle. And anytime one of those guys had gone out, the run defense had gone down quite a bit. And so Buckner is announced to not play in that game. And so I go, and I write about it. And I go like, that's perfect for the Falcons, right? It's going to be Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson like on repeat. And then Grover Stewart, Cleveland, I believe is like the 23rd president of the United States. Stewart like goes and he gets hurt. And so both of them are out. And the Falcons call a bunch of pass plays. It's just like they're missing the two guys, like both of them. Like we know, again, I say to my wife all the time, like if some jackass sitting on his couch up in Toronto knows that like this is a key advantage, like they should know that it's a key advantage.
Figure it out,
right? Like, do I need to send a text? Like how, like, a heads up here? So that was really annoying because it was just like, I think if Bijan and Tyler Algier just like keep getting the ball here, I think the Falcons are going to win this game. And so again, there's just enough plays where it's like, well, let's force this move with Penix. None of that necessarily has anything to do with this game other than, like you mentioned with regards to the Panthers, right? Like when can the Panthers be trusted? I think that, we talked about it, and I hate to sort of blanket statement, right? But like with Bryce Young, I feel like it needs to be mentioned over and over again. Bryce Young sucks. Again, it's not great analysis. We talked about it last week.
No. I watched last week, and I turned on the game for a bit, and I was like, "Yep, this is what we were talking about." Yeah.
You watch him play, and there's a couple of drives, and you're just like, Bryce Young sucks, and that sucks for everybody involved because I think the team around him is otherwise pretty good. I think they have a decent defense. I think the offensive line's we talked about the one run play that they just kept, they ran to success with Rico Dowdle. Now he's kind of banged up, right? Like he's getting like massages mid-game constantly on that quad and has kind of a rough game from like a running perspective, right? Yards per play, yards per carry. And so my concern is that the one thing that the Panthers do is no longer maybe something that they can do as well as they had been doing. And meanwhile, the Panthers are getting just enough credit off of being 5-5 that they're no longer 6.5 point underdogs in this situation, or whatever it was. Were they 5.5 home underdogs when this game happened the first time around? I mean, think about that for a second, right? Like if you flip locations, right, from 2 months ago, this should be 7.5 or 8.5. It's 3.5 because of how the Panthers have been sort of, gotten some credit for being, decent. And so I just look at it and I go, wow, we're only getting, we're only giving 3.5 to this team who, again, I think the quarterback sucks. And so, again, not great analysis, but like, feel free to go in through the numbers and do all that sort of thing. I like the Panthers when they're getting 6.5, 7, 8.5 points, and the rest of the team can keep the game close. I do not like it when they're favored by 5.5 or any points, or they're only getting 3 to 3.5 on the road against a team that, by the way, Shell, was this the 11th time I've said it? Key to motivation in the NFL, embarrassment. Who had a more embarrassing loss than getting shut out by the Panthers earlier on this season? I think as much as like the return home from Berlin could be a little shaky for the Falcons. I like it better that they lost, as weird as that sounds, right?
Yeah.
They win that game in Berlin, and now you have got the Panthers. And I like it even more that they got housed by the Panthers the first time around. And as we've talked about in that game, the box score wasn't even that bad. So it's not like you can look back at that and go like, no, actually the Panthers are definitively the better team. It's a crazy game. They lose by like 30 points, and like the box score, I think the Falcons outgained them by like 100 or 150 yards, something like that. So I think the Falcons win this game, and I think they do it relatively comfortably.
Yeah, I also think too, one of the themes we talked about earlier this year about the Falcons was they do play better at home, right? Like for
Sure.
whatever reason, like Penix and the
Mhm.
offense the games that they have looked good, it's been home
Mhm.
games. So yeah, maybe there's a little something there for us as well. Our next game, San Francisco 49ers on the road in Arizona, take on the Cardinals. San Fran favored by 2.5 points here, and Jacoby Brissett and company got smashed. The Niners, they didn't get smashed, but that game was a weird game. I'd say their defense got smashed.
Yeah,
if anything,
you're right.
Right?
Yeah.
Mac Jones, I thought I'm still on the Mac Jones train, so I know this Brock Purdy thing's going to get weird at some point because the decision's going to have to be made here. And
right.
hey, we're looking at this week. Still don't know who the starter is as Brock Purdy works his way back. But either way, I think the defense got cooked by Matthew Stafford. I don't know if Jacoby Brissett is the guy that's going to be able to cook this Niners defense. And in terms of the Niners offense, I still think the Niners offense was solid. Mac Jones threw for over 300 yards. There are a couple plays that really flipped that game. The big fumble by Jennings last week. And then, Christian McCaffrey getting stopped on, I think it was the 4th and 1, couldn't get to the outside. And that completely flipped that game. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the Niners, laying the 2.5 on the road, but I'm not going to lie to you. It's a sentimental pick.
It's a last sort of ditch effort, right? For them to keep pace with whoever wins.
Yeah.
Our favorite game of the week from at least a viewing perspective, right? Rams and Seahawks. Okay, let's talk about the line because this is the one that is a head shaker for me until you look at the injury report because this is as high as the 49ers have been rated all season.
Wow.
Outside of maybe, I guess, week 1, right?
Yeah,
so under Mac Jones, they have been, and because of all the injuries, as you're well aware, they have been rated as a below average team. It's why they got bet up to +6 at home last week against the Rams. It's why in that first matchup weeks ago against the Rams that they were 8.5, right? The market respect for the 49ers hasn't been there because of literally the depth chart that they've had to sort of put out there on a week-to-week basis that literally gets worse by the week. And so I look and I see that this number where they're favored on the road, and then again, as we always use our second data point, like the look-ahead line for next week, San Francisco's -6.5 next week against Carolina. Speaking of Carolina getting 6.5 points or something along those lines, right? So again, part of that is built in. Well, even if Brock Purdy doesn't play this week, there's at least a better chance he plays next week. And so therefore, the rating for the 49ers kind of gets the estimated rating, I should say, for the 49ers kind of gets artificially raised because next week is part of the data points, right? And so, okay, we're going to get up to 56 for the 49ers.
Okay.
It's like, is that enough? Is Brock Purdy coming back and Ricky Pearsall enough to legitimize a 49ers rating of 56, knowing that we will not be hearing Nick Bosa's music, Fred Warner's music, Michael Williams' music, so on and so forth down the line, right? And again, the offense gets a little bit more healthy where you don't have to sit around and go like, who are these guys starting at wide receiver? And so I go, okay, like I'm a solid maybe on, and to me, you wouldn't be like, I don't think they should be upgraded that much with Brock Purdy coming back because as you said, you're still a Mac Jones guy. And again, maybe you've always thought that Mac Jones and the 49ers should be rated higher. And honestly, I would believe that. And I would be sort of with you there. So then you go to the Cardinals and you go, okay, well, like what, if that's the case for the 49ers, like what rating do the Cardinals still have? And they still have a below range, through the bottom of the range type of a rating because, again, they get housed by the 49ers by the Seahawks last week.
Yeah.
But leading up to that game, all I heard from a lot of people was like, this is too many points against Seattle, and that the Cardinals are one of the most underrated teams in the league. And it's like, yeah, we talked about that before the Cowboys game.
Yeah.
And we won a bet with the Cardinals before the Cowboys game because we were a week earlier than all these people trying to tell you that the Cardinals are a most underrated team. And that went out the window when you win a game on Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
Even against a brand that is the Cowboys, even if the Cowboys aren't all that good.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, like, why are the Cardinals ratings still so far down? It's like, well, they get housed by Seattle, but then you go to the depth chart injury report when it comes to the Arizona Cardinals, and then you are reminded that they didn't have literally both of their starting cornerbacks last week, which, like, if you're gonna go against Jackson Smith and Jigma, like,
you might want that.
Probably not. You might want the good players if that's the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to need Max Melton. We're going to need Will Johnson. We're going to even need the Darius Robinsons and the Mac Wilsons of the world and the Walter Nolans, right? The guys on Monday Night Football were all excited about Walter Nolan finally making his debut in the middle of that defense for the Cardinals. And really not that surprisingly, if you're going to play 2 games in 6 weeks of your first 2 games of your career, you might get yourself banged up in those first 2 games, like joining mid-season, right? Mid-season form, if you will. And so he's questionable as well. And so you might have 5 starters here for the Cardinals missing this game. And so that's where the ratings and the point spread and all of that stuff starts to make a little bit more sense, right? Where you're like, well, if the Cardinals are just this ravaged, the Garrett Williams, Denzel Burke duo at cornerback for the Cardinals could have some problems against Brock Purdy and, Ricky Pearsall if he finally plays. But even if he doesn't, Juwan Jennings, and just in general, the 49ers offense from a structural perspective. So, again, I'm going to need you to get your 4 to 5 starters back in the lineup here because the Cardinals offense, I think, can move the ball against the 49ers defense. That's how ravaged the 49ers defense is, right? It's just a matter of like, if one team's got all the injuries on defense, but you now also have all the injuries, then we're just kind of back to like square one here.
It's like, just what
right?
What are
and
we
I think
here?
Yeah, and so I think square one ends up being like, I guess the 49ers probably should be a favorite here. So again, we need the injury report on this one to potentially be into the Cardinals. I think if they get a positive injury report, we end up seeing this game go back closer to pick 'em, at which point, if you like the 49ers kind of hell or high water, then like maybe waiting and grabbing the 49ers at pick 'em is an option for you. But if Brock Purdy plays, the rating goes up, we get a full +3 here, and maybe the market doesn't really notice that the Cardinals are getting healthier than they were last week because they didn't really seem to care that much that these Cardinals were out last week, then maybe the Cardinals at like +3 become an interesting bet. So definitely sort of a fence sit situation, but we got to see what happens here with some of this injury stuff.
Again, where the line is, where it was, where it could be heading. I like it.
Yeah, where it could be heading. Yeah.
The Chiefs are 3.5-point favorites in Denver, taking on said Broncos. Chiefs coming off a bye. Broncos played last Thursday, but did not look that good versus the Raiders. But, hey, you take the wins, right? You take the wins. This one, though, I'm going to be super honest. This is just a classic KC off the bye week and a gotta have it divisional game where they're trying to maintain and keep up. Not even maintain, surpass, catch up in the division. This is a must win game for the Kansas City Chiefs. And as mentioned, Andy Reid off the bye, all those fun stats. I'm trusting in the institution of the Kansas City Chiefs here, of Andy Reid and Patty Mahomes, and I am laying the 3.5 points on the road, which I'm sure comes as a surprise to no one. Let's go.
Yeah, shocked. They're shocked throughout the Clutch Picks podcast land that Shell is on the on the Chiefs, right on the other side of the key number too. Just like,
Oh yeah.
chef's kiss, right? Like textbook type stuff.
Yeah.
Uh okay, so I mean the Broncos side of things, right? Like I compared it, I was doing a show last night with the guys over at the Hammer, and I compared it to that 90s movie classic Swingers.
Yep.
Vince Vaughn, John Favreau. They're in the bar, and Vince Vaughn's character Trent wants Mikey, John Favreau's character,
Okay.
to be the guy in the rated R movie, right? Who you're not quite sure about, right? You got these fangs, you got these claws. That's what the market has felt about the Denver Broncos, right? Putting them up at a level where they keep consistently being 6.5, 8.5, Giants, Jets, all this. Like they've been the team that's most been a contender for usage in Survivor, right? Like out of the 10 weeks so far this season, I'm pretty sure like they were at least a nominee 5 of those weeks. Like even for like a really good team, that's kind of a lot, right? And so because they've had this schedule where it's like, why can't you just blow one of these teams out? And it's like, oh, they escape against Tennessee, which is a game that was a lot closer than even just the 8-point or 9-point margin in week 1, and that was more of the same to come, right, with Jets and the Giants and last week's game against the Raiders, which, like, if it's anybody other than the Raiders, they probably lose that game. And so it's like, you're not doing anything with these fangs, man. Like, you're still just a PG rated team. And so the market has now finally been like, okay, like, we've been putting you, and there's a reason, like, we sort of have these divides and they work kind of well. But if the Broncos are a 59 all season long in some of these games where they've been, favored by this much, if they had been like, say, the Seahawks or the Colts, and they had won and covered some of these games against these bad teams, they would be up in the high 60s, right? They would be getting that credit. But instead, for whatever reason, Sean Payton, Bo Nix, whatever, they keep just, as you said, just winning these games. The market goes like, I'm tired of rating you on the cusp of being a contender. And so with this rating, in part, well, it's not even that we know that you're not that, because at a certain point you do get credit for winning the games, right? And so you got, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, this is still the NFL, and like we've seen better teams, Lions, Bills, lose these games literally in the last couple of weeks, right? Like the Packers lost a home game to the Panthers where they were 13-point favorites, and they're still rated way ahead of the Denver Broncos. And so it's like, yeah, we're not psyched about the fact that you never blow these teams out, and therefore the rating is going to drop, when in reality, maybe the rating is kind of just appropriate, where, yeah, they're not those other teams, but maybe they are, in a weird way, built to kind of win or play close games against kind of anybody, right? They're that weird sort of middle team where it's like, yeah, we're going to play the best teams tight. We're going to play the kind of crappiest teams tight. And we're just going to survive kind of on that. And so now we're looking, well, yeah. And so now they're not being asked to win by any margin. They're not even really technically being asked to win. I might ask them to win, but they're not being asked to win here. They're asked to just play that sort of same type of close game, which, by the way, they literally did in their only sort of meaningful matchup against the Chiefs last year. Well, you'll recall, right? They get a field goal block. The Chiefs get a field goal block as one of the many sort of, they should have lost that games from last season. And so if the Broncos are better than that team, which I think they are, then why can't this game be close? And so I think you're getting some value with the Broncos because of the downgrade of frustration of watching from an eye test perspective these close games against these, like, I was going to quotation mark the bad teams, but they are bad teams. Meanwhile, you got the Chiefs, who get the super huge rating bump for winning 3 straight games in a way that we think is more becoming, right? They win and cover in big numbers against the Raiders, for example, and what was the other one? The Commanders. And so you go, okay, we're going to bump this rating up, and then all of a sudden they're road favorites against the Bills, and we go, well, just that matchup alone suggests the Bills, because of history, but also because a Chiefs rating in the high 70s is a lot to live up to. And a lot of people get suckered in at the -2.5 on the Chiefs because, like, oh, they just have to win by a field goal. And it's like, yeah, well, the Bills are probably a lot closer in ability at their best as the Chiefs. And, it's a close game, Bills win. And so the Chiefs should get downgraded back to sort of human decency reality of like, yes, give them a 73, man. Like, put them, still in a really good spot, but like 77, 78 is still where they are. And part of that is we're willing to look past a loss in Buffalo. We're also doing the Andy Reid off of a bye thing, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, we're going to keep the rating up. We're not going to downgrade the Chiefs. We're not going to do it. Because, by the way, at this matchup, when the number is the way that it is, where it is just 3.5, people aren't going to allow this game to be minus 2.5. Right? They're not going to require the Chiefs. They're not going to force the Chiefs rating down to probably where it should be, because also people are annoyed, frankly, that the Broncos have not been the guy in the rated R movie with the claws and with the fangs. And so this number here is too much for me. I have to keep my personal rating of the Chiefs still at number 1 in the league, but down towards like 75. And yeah, I'm as bummed out as everybody else that the Broncos don't cover. Not really, because I don't think I've been on the Broncos to cover any of these actual games. But like, I recognize, because we track this stuff, that the Broncos have been downgraded. And so I'm like, yeah, they're still winning the games, and like, I still respect at least that you're winning the games. And so if they were winning the games and they would be rated like a 70 or a 65, then I'd be like, no. We'd be talking like we did with the Chiefs last year, where it'd be like, no, this team's overrated. They are being rated at a 55. They are rated 1 to 2 rating points better than the Buccaneers. They are rated right now at the same point that the 49ers are rated. We just mentioned the rating of the 49ers this week, getting bumped up to 55, 56. I think they beat both of those teams on a neutral field. I think they're better than both of those teams on a neutral field. So therefore, I think the Broncos are a little underrated. I think the Chiefs still a little overrated in a matchup that, for the Broncos, some of that bye week deal with Andy Reid is that the other team isn't on a bye week. And the Broncos aren't on a bye week, but they are on a pretty significant break from playing on Thursday. They also have a bye week next week, which means like this is their only game for like 20 something days, right? Like, and this is the game that, when it comes to the division and separation and all of that sort of thing, where the Broncos still, by the way, have the lead in the division, this is the biggest game of the season for the Broncos. And so if we're not pumped about their game against the Giants, Jets, or Raiders, can't we sort of go, how much were they pumped about that game? None of those games were the biggest game of the year for them. So, a lot of people sort of referencing, and I kind of blew the minds of the guys last night on the Hammer when I sort of said, like, they mentioned Patrick Surtain being out for this game. And I sort of twisted it away, and I don't think they really kind of understood, because it is sort of a concept that's kind of tricky to understand. If Patrick Surtain was in this game, do you think Andy Reid would just start throwing the ball at Patrick Surtain the entire time? No, he'd come up with a game plan to be like, I'm not going to just throw the ball at the other team's best player all the time. And so he would move Rashee Rice around, and he would throw Xavier Worthy out there in the spot where Patrick Surtain most likes to play, and would say to him, like, yeah, if you want to just run go routes with Xavier Worthy all day, we'll play 10 on 10 the rest of the way. And so the fact that Surtain's not in this game isn't not important. It's just less important because I don't think that he would have been a factor, because out of respect for Andy Reid and his ability to just be like, let's just take Patrick Surtain out of this game, right? And so it's like, it wouldn't have been if Surtain just said all of a sudden, oh man, like, I'm playing in this game. I wouldn't want the line to move to 2.5, because all of a sudden the Broncos have that much better of a chance to win. Because while that works against the dumb teams who, I'll use the Houston Texans, for example. If Patrick Surtain's out there on Nico Collins, they're just going to keep running Nico Collins routes and just throw the ball to Nico Collins, and Surtain's going to break it up and maybe intercept it, right? They're not going to have a plan B around it, whereas the Chiefs, will have a plan B if Surtain was playing. And the fact that he's not, like, yeah, you'd rather Surtain playing, but like, it's not like he was going to make the play of the game, because the Chiefs aren't reliant on one key receiver. Like, yeah, Rashee Rice is the big sort of fantasy guy, because they're tossing him a lot of passes behind the line of scrimmage, and he's scoring that way. He's not Justin Jefferson. He's not Jamar Chase,
Yeah, it is an interesting thing that, as we've seen the Chiefs sort of, get their weapons back, their full arsenal of weapons back. But there's still holes there, as you mentioned, right? Lack of a running game still hurts them for sure. And just the ball control type offense that they like to run. So yeah, this is a tough one. And listen, an extra half point on the road, like this is a tough game. This is just, next week when we come back and talk about it, I'll be like, Chiefs, half points on the road.
Chiefs by 3. Yeah, they did it. They won by 3. They ran the clock out with a 7-minute drive to end the game, like all that kind of stuff.
Never seen that happen before.
No.
Let's go here. We got the Ravens, 7.5-point favorites in Cleveland, taking on the Browns. Ravens looked pretty good against the Vikings, but it was JJ McCarthy not really doing his thing. But hey, this week, Mr. Gabriel,
yeah.
Listen, yeah, not going to diss him too much, but we'll say the key to the Ravens, as you pointed out weeks ago, was their defense, and their defense getting more and more healthy. And that's what we've really seen, regardless of whether it's JJ McCarthy or Gabriel this week. The point is that the Ravens defense, that's how their team will go, right? The health and the readiness of their defense will carry this team as far as they need to go. Now, that and laying 7.5 points on the road against a team that normally plays them pretty tough.
Yeah.
This is one where I looked at all my picks and I'm like, I have a lot of opportunities to take home dogs and I haven't done. And this is a classic one where I just would take the home dog. I just don't get how the Browns do it again. Like if you used up your juju with the special teams plays last week, right? I don't know. This is a tough one for me. I don't know how the Browns offense puts up points.
Yeah, listen, if you give up 2 touchdowns to the Ravens special teams, they're in really big trouble. This game's blowout city, right? The fact that they were sitting around in that game going like, I can't believe we've just done this in a game that they should have really just shown up and won. And, they come down, they get that first touchdown. It's like, yeah, this is how this is going to work, right? They're going to score 17 to 20 points. The Jets aren't going to score at all. And then the Jets score 2 of the more random ways that you can score. Yeah, you mentioned the defense with the Ravens. And again, if the Browns can run the football against the Ravens, they have a chance to win the game as long as they don't turn the ball over or don't get too sort of spicy on this. And the Browns defense at home in what's probably going to be scummy weather, Cleveland, we might get the tornado winds and all that kind of stuff, and it just turns into this super grimy game. And the key to, in my opinion, stopping the Ravens, right, is still shutting down Derrick Henry. And if your defensive line, which I think the Browns can, get in the backfield, stop him before he gets going, then now all of a sudden, again, if the weather's grotesque, it's going to be really hard for Lamar Jackson to throw, down the field. And so at that point, you get into that sketchy scenario where you're a couple turnovers away from kind of making a trip to upset town. And if the Browns with Quinshon Judkins can do the run the ball thing, which the Vikings, the problem with that game last week was that they weren't able to do that. And I don't think anybody thinks of the Vikings as this run first offense, which is, kind of the vexing part, obviously, about the Vikings, and the tricky part with them with JJ McCarthy, knowing that it's not just, hey, we're starting a rookie quarterback. We're starting a rookie quarterback in an offense that when it's at its best in a weird way is when the quarterback is throwing the ball, maybe not 40 times.
No, but I know.
But 30 times, right? Because it's what are we going to do with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason? It's not really this. It's not how Kevin O'Connell sort of cooks. And so that works out pretty well. I talked about, last week with that Ravens game, the Dolphins being able to successfully move the ball against them. And so again, if you get into field goal range enough times, if this is that kind of low scoring type of a game, again, with a couple of turnovers, then this game gets a lot tighter. And I think that's usually how the Browns kind of stay in games with the Ravens. Would it be better if I, felt more comfortable with the quarterback? Even sort of the Browns, Joe Flacco, if you will. Yeah, Like that would be nice. Because Dylan Gabriel probably isn't it. And that I don't think they're trying to lose games, which means how bad is your boy Shador if Dylan Gabriel so far, hasn't really shown all that much. But I think Dylan Gabriel can run the plays, right? Like I think he can run the sort of easy plays, and maybe that's enough in a game where, like, again, could be low scoring, could be pretty grimy. So, yeah, I'm not laying it with Baltimore. I'll tell you that right now. And the fact that this opened 8.5, by the way, right? Like where it
Yeah.
is, where it was, where it is, where it's going. I think there's kind of an indicator there that, like, some of the sharper money is more interested in backing the dog here and really daring Baltimore to win this game by, a decent sized margin. Again, given how scarce points might be, given the conditions of this game.
Yeah, then this is another classic game of something we've seen before. We're going to be turning on the TV on a Sunday and then being like, "Oh, the Ravens just kind of showed up to this game. Didn't really, no real interest in playing, but just kind of showed up. We're going to try to do enough. Maybe need a comeback, but you're right. Ugly weather, all that fun stuff. And I'm going to be kicking myself. And yeah, we'll be here again. And I'll be like, why? Could have just listened. But here we are.
Yeah, and it's a 2-game sample size. The Ravens defense hasn't been particularly great in those 2 games from like an EPA per play perspective. Just so everybody is sort of aware, right? Like this isn't like, oh, the Ravens defense, like they are back and like things are
Ray Lewis.
It's more just
back.
like, it's more just like, well, they're not terrible anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's
something.
I guess that's enough. Right? I guess not terrible is a compliment, but yeah, all right, cool.
So we got the Lions at the Eagles on Sunday Night Football. Eagles at home and laying 2.5 points. The Lions rolled last week. Dan Campbell, as you mentioned earlier on in the pod, calling the plays. It seemed to work, but I mean, it was against the Commanders, so time will still tell. Now a bit of an upgrade as you're going up against an Eagles defense that looked to shut down the Packers last week. Very strange game, including the ending and Mr. Sirianni. I don't even know what was going on there on 4th down at the very end of the game. It's like just upping the level of difficulty, right? I don't know. But I'm on the Lions here at plus 2.5. The Eagles, I still just have a lot of questions about the Eagles because I don't understand the Eagles at all. Like how their offense... like how their offense moves, like even the touchdown that they did get, like that was an underthrown ball, like deep ball. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Like should have been an easier touchdown, but it's still underthrown.
Right. Throw it 5 yards further and it's a easier touchdown. Like why does everything look so difficult? It doesn't make sense.
It does not make sense at all. I'm on the Lions, but again, this is one where I'd love to get 3. It's probably never going to happen. It's probably never going to happen, but I'd like to get the 3. And then you sit and you look at the Eagles who like somehow just do enough. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. It's like 2 good teams. Give me the points. If I can get the edge and get a couple points and hope, that's where I'm at with this one. Cause I do like the Lions, but you're talking about, I know what you're going to say. Jared Goff outside. Jared Goff, right? Like I know. I know.
Yeah. It's not, I mean, it isn't as simple, right? Obviously, and you know this about the Jared Goff outdoors thing, right? But like, if a lot of the reputation of the Lions is built off of almost a full season of playing indoors last year, then it does need to be mentioned. It doesn't guarantee anything because he played a nice game in Green Bay last season in like bleepy weather. So, it isn't sort of as simple as that. For me, it's, well, let's just put it this way, right? The Eagles rating has gone up, right? Like to make them a 2.5 point favorite. And by the way, this opened minus 1.5. So interesting that like early money was like, yeah, let's jump on this Eagles thing like now before it's too late, or like they weren't willing to see if Lions money came in to make it a pick 'em. You saw last week, when we spoke of the Monday Night Football game, it was 2.5 for the Packers. By the time like Saturday, I think that is when the line moved. But like by the time Monday rolled around, that game was a pick 'em, which is an indicator that like money came in on the Eagles. And it wasn't because Matthew Golden was expected to be out for the Packers. And of course, we already knew that Tucker Kraft was going to be out. So it wasn't because of that. It was just sort of organic interest in the Eagles. And again, maybe Hurts doesn't fumble the ball early in that game, and the script of that game goes a little bit differently, and the Eagles can kind of take a lead in the first half, and then kind of lean on the Packers, who seemed like they were fine with just handing the ball to Josh Jacobs and kind of hoping for the best, which like I don't know what either team was really doing with like play calling, whether it's the fourth down call. AJ Brown, by the way, with one of like the absolute worst efforts on a critical play on that fourth down. Like nobody's seemingly, and maybe they are, I don't, take in that much sort of, nonsense content, but like draw a defensive pass interference on that play. Like any star receiver or good receiver like understands that when the corner has his back turned to the ball, you can push through that cornerback and get a call basically every single time. And just kind of like letting the ball kind of fall 2 feet away from you is like unacceptable. And so when you ask like what's the deal with this team, it's all these like tiny elements where you're just like, yeah, what's this guy's problem? And like, why can't Jalen Hurts in year 5 or whatever it is throw a decent pass more than 2 times a game? And this guy won the Super Bowl MVP that we bet on, by the way. Like not even just the Super Bowl, the MVP. We bet on him to win MVP, and we won with that. And I still watch him a year later, and I go like how is this not better? Like it's infuriating. And so all of that to say is like sometimes, and again, it's happened a couple times a week per week here that we have this conversation where I just look at the ratings bump and I just go, the betting market is kind of telling us that we need to be betting on the Eagles in this game. And again, it's a different version of the Broncos where, again, the fangs, like you got these fangs, you got these claws, and we want the Eagles to blow teams out or take these leads, and they just never do it. And then like when they're absolutely pressed to, like against the Rams, it's like, okay, we'll throw the ball a lot here. And it's actually going to work out. Okay. And so it's infuriating. I mean, I liked the Eagles last week because of the holes that are everybody's, favorite general manager, Howie Roseman, filled from a defensive perspective. And immediately Jalen Phillips makes plays. And like the fact that we didn't hear Michael Carter II's name probably means that he had it on lockdown against the Packers, right? Like when you don't hear about a cornerback, it's usually better. And that forced some throws to go Quinyon Mitchell's way. And it's like, that's not what the other team is really sort of wanting to do. And so again, like the Lions thing against the Commanders is very cool and all that they like figured out Jameson Williams is on the team and they were just running essentially kind of the same play with him, crossing routes against a defense that I've talked about with Bobby Wagner and just some of the secondary where it's just like throw the ball in the middle of the field against the Commanders and you're probably just kind of good, which by the way makes me even more concerned about the potential for a Commanders bet in Spain this week. But it's like if there's an obvious hole and you're taking advantage of it, and then that hole doesn't exist the following week, then what's the next move? Because now it's a battle in the trenches here, right? And again, we got injury issues here for the Lions that not that many people are sort of looking at, right? And it's like, is Graham Glasnow, the center for the Lions, going to be able to like play in this game? And if they don't, now you've got a middle of your offensive line dealing with Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and all these other sort of blitz packages where like Nolan Smith was back last week. So like the Eagles, as far as we know them from a defensive perspective, for the first whatever it was 9 weeks of the season, got Nolan Smith and Jalen Phillips back. And so if the best part about the Eagles for all of Hurts' offense, winning MVP, yada yada yada, the thing that won them the Super Bowl last year. Depth on the defensive line, pass rush, and just a rotating cast of dudes. Well, they just added 2 dudes last week in Jalen Phillips and Nolan Smith. And so, again, if you're compromised in the middle of your offensive line and you're outdoors and you're on the road and it's certainly a tougher place to play than Washington, right, where we've seen like the Bears come in and win and the Seahawks absolutely trounce. Like I guess my point is I'm not buying that much of the Lions from last week. And honestly, I'm still more concerned about them dealing with the Vikings defense at home from the 2 weeks prior to that. And honestly kind of a lackluster performance at home against the Buccaneers, maybe like whatever that was a month ago. And so I'm still waiting for the Lions in sort of a proper way. And I don't know that you're going to get the advantageous matchups that you've seen from the Lions in, getting Amon-Ra St. Brown open against these three corners, right? And you mentioned Cooper DeJean, right? And so three really good corners now on the Eagles when we were kind of wondering if there was even two, like, yeah, man, like this is going to be another one where I'm going to take the Eagles. It's going to be gross. It's going to be annoying. You're going to be like, why aren't they scoring more of the points? But they're going to grind it out. They'll probably win by 3. And, people are still going to be annoyed with like, why aren't the Eagles better? And it's going to be like, yeah, Broncos and Eagles. No wonder they played such a hilarious game a few weeks ago because they might be the exact same team. Obviously, the difference being that the Eagles are getting rated as like the third or fourth best team. And while I don't necessarily believe that, I think the matchup here might support it, at least for this 1 week. And I think that's why the market has reacted the way that they have, pushing this number to a point where you might get your 3 if you really want your 3 that badly. Oh, baby.
The pick has been switched to the Eagles.
Oh boy.
At the -2.5. Yeah, it's the Eagles. I can't pretend to know what's going on with the Eagles from week to week. Just trying to ride the wave here. I'm trying to ride the wave.
Yeah.
I need the extra push. So I appreciate you giving me the extra confidence in a pick, which I know at times, sometimes it's not even what you're trying to do. You're just giving information and I'm making the decision.
Yeah.
But hey,
sure.
Here we are.
It's so funny. The Eagles are so funny that like Terrion Arnold and Kirby Joseph are like questionable, right? Like two key members of the Lions secondary. And like I would love to cite that as a reason to potentially like the Eagles, but like they're so weird that like I don't even know if that matters, right? It's like, yeah, they're without 2 of their secondary. It's like, is it against the Eagles? Like, yeah, like all right, like did they know? Like, did they even care? Is that going to get them out of their game plan, which is designed, it feels like, to just bore everybody to death? Yeah. Like, yeah, like kind of is. So I don't know.
Craziness indeed. We close though with Monday Night Football action. Dallas Cowboys. Speaking of being on the road and laying 3.5 points, and me foolishly taking the road team.
Oh, sweet Lord. 3.5
points. Dallas Cowboys are in Vegas taking on the Raiders. The Raiders last played. This is very familiar to the game between that we talked about earlier with, I know it's very different because we're talking about Cowboys and comparing them to the Chiefs and the Raiders, comparing them to Denver. But the only similarity is that Denver and the Raiders played on Thursday. You got the Cowboys and Chiefs coming off of a bye. Both teams are on the road, favored by 3.5 points.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are. The Dallas Cowboys should not be trusted against anybody, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For them to be laying 3.5 points on the road, I just have to believe that the Raiders are that bad. And what I watched last week did not look good against the Broncos. But my question more so is just about the injury report, because I desperately need to know if certain key members of said Las Vegas Raiders are in the lineup, namely Brock Bowers, namely Max Crosby. These are dudes I need to know are playing, or else I can't believe I'm laying the 3.5 points with the Cowboys.
Yeah, those guys are playing. No issue there at all. My biggest issue with the Raiders is another O-line issue, right? Like an injury, Jackson Powers Johnson, guard put on IR. Again, like whether it's injuries or just general crappiness in a unit, it kind of comes down to like, can you take advantage of it, right? And so the general crappiness here is the Dallas Cowboys defense. And so my question is like, can the Raiders take advantage of it? And to maybe some surprise, I actually think they can. I think that because as the aforementioned Brock Bowers is playing in this game. And so again, if Brock Bowers is kind of your best thing, you're going to be in trouble against really good defenses. And so when he doesn't do anything or doesn't have the opportunity to do anything, I think that wasn't like by design for the Raiders. It was by Broncos defensive game plan being like, we are going to make you beat us with somebody other than Brock Bowers. And by the way, like, the Raiders might have, if their rookie receiver Thornton doesn't throw like a screen, a pick that like you would love to see on an NBA Raptors broadcast, right? Like just some of like a high school level, like we are out here, we are taking this and we are screen and rolling to the hoop. And it's like, that's not how this works in the NFL. You are not allowed to do that, sir. You have to at least go to some acting classes and be able to kind of fake it a little bit. And so if they get that touchdown that they scored early on in the game, as weird as it is to say because it was so early in the game, maybe the Raiders just win the game, right? Throw in a field goal missed by, again, one of the frankly more unreliable kickers in the league as far as I'm concerned, but it's the Raiders, so they're going to keep running Carlson out there. And the Raiders could have won that game. And so, again, if you're going to besmirch the Broncos, you're going to knock their rating down, then like I think you need to at least move the Raiders rating up because they hung in there, right? Like you can't just blame the Broncos in their entirety when like the Raiders had something to do with it as well. And so I think Geno Smith is fine. He got kind of a cheap shot that like nobody mentioned and that sort of hurt his quad. Maybe if he doesn't have that injury, there's an extra first down that gets made somewhere along the way. And honestly, that might have been enough to very at least tie the game with a closer field goal. And so, fundamentally, I don't think the Raiders are rated high enough, which is kind of a weird thing as it's coming out of my mouth because it's the Raiders. And I don't think they're all that good. But I don't think they're as bad as this rating suggests because this rating, which again had them as a 9-point underdog last week, which they covered, still exists at the same number, frankly, not even in the same sort of range, in the same actual number. And I think the offense for the Raiders is good enough when Brock Bowers is playing against a defense like, say, the Jaguars, where that game goes to overtime, right to the brink of overtime, where they go for, the win in overtime, against a Cowboys defense that, like, I think it can work against the Cowboys defense. I don't think it can work against the Rams defense. I don't think it can work against the Broncos defense. Everything works, right? The Cardinals, even just look at the Cardinals, right? So the Cowboys, it's easy to go after the fact. And one of the sort of best handicapping things of the year is, all right, how did the offense look against the Cowboys? And if you think that offense is going to look as good the next week, you're probably wrong. And so the Broncos, for example, had that, right? Where it's the best the offense looked all year when they played the Cowboys. And then the next week, it doesn't look as awesome. And so, like, next week, we might be fading the Raiders because their offense looked so good against the Cowboys on Monday, in the same way that we faded the Cardinals last week because their offense looked a little too good against the Cowboys. But we have to know that ahead of time. And so I'm willing to bet ahead of time that the Raiders offense looks a little too good. That maybe come week 12, I don't even know who they play next week. Maybe week 12, like the Raiders who are home to the Browns. Like imagine the Raiders have a nice offensive showing against the Cowboys. What that Raiders line might be home to the Browns. They might be like 3.5-point favorites, at which point I'm going to be like, I don't think it's going to work against the Browns defense, and I'm going to be on the Browns at plus 3.5 in Las Vegas the next week. So that's the way I see this game. And I go, yeah, okay, like the Cowboys are going to be able to keep up. They're going to be able to score because the Cowboys have a good offense too. Cool. That's just never, hasn't really worked this season, right? They haven't been able to keep up. And by the way, even if they keep up, they're favored by 3.5, which means like they have to do better than keep up. They have to take a lead and sustain a lead. They have to hold the lead. And I'm getting 3.5 points. It's, to me, you mentioned it's a comparable game to, Kansas City and whatnot. And like, that all makes sense. To me, it's comparable to Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. It's just like, how are we laying points with a team that cannot stop anybody? And again, just go back to the Cardinals game. Like I think we referenced it last week. The Cardinals had 5 conversions on third down of greater than 3rd and 6. Including multiple like 3rd and 18s or like 3rd and 15s. It's because the defense is so bad. It was like Marvin Harrison, just run 20 yards and then turn around. And you are just going to be open. And Jacoby Brissett, who honestly at this point in his career is pretty much the same thing as Geno Smith, is just going to throw the ball right to a spot and you're going to be able to convert this first down. And again, like, okay, well, they got Logan Wilson and Quinnen Williams. Okay. Like Quentin Williams is gonna have to do some stuff for the Cowboys defense to all of a sudden be better, because like, I'm sorry, that's not enough in this one game, this one season, to turn the Cowboys defense around. I do not believe that. And I'm betting against that by taking the Raiders here. Plus 3.5 at home in, frankly, a game I think they win outright.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. I like
the
that.
change.
The
A lot of
gong
changes
is
today?
sounding.
I don't know. Feels like there's a lot of changes.
Let's see here. Let's get a final tally here. As we
that-
switch this one to the Raiders plus 3.5. Let's see. That's 1. Eagles is 2.
Prime time's gonna be electric.
The Titans 3.
Yeah.
Bills 4.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I think that's it. 4.
Okay.
I want to say on a weekly basis, we average probably like 2 to 3. Something like that.
Yeah,
I'd say the over under. If we're doing an over or under, I'd put the line at about 2.5 to 3. Fitting, isn't it?
If it wasn't wholly manipulatable, I don't know if that's a word. Like a sportsbook should offer that, right? Like over under 3.5. How many switches is Shell gonna have?
If that was the case, I'd definitely be getting my Emmanuel Classe on, though.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean by the word that I made up or botched or however you put it, right? It's like
only the deep heads.
Yeah, we could do that, but like. I don't know. It's pretty topical.
Right? Okay, fair enough. I was a little too proud of myself there.
Good though. I liked it.
I don't even know what's going on right now. But
we are at 2.5 hours here.
Monday,
we gotta wrap it.
I know. Monday, before we get to Monday's action and whatever happens between the Raiders and said Cowboys, where can the people find you to figure out, just where else you'll be putting out more information on all of these games?
Yeah, over at The Window on Substack, The Window, Matt Russell. You can follow at MRussAuthentic on Twitter as well. But if you just go to substack.com and just type in The Window, Matt Russell, The Window sports betting, Matt Russell, any combination of those. I will mention, we don't make promises over at The Window. I'm just going to mention, we won 12 straight college football games last week. That was kind of awesome. That was super fun. We didn't lose a college football game until 10:22 p.m. on Saturday. How fun is that? Going through the entire Saturday almost without losing a game. So that was cool. Went on a little 12 straight heater there. Never probably going to be doing that again. But again, we've been cooking along at around 57, 58% in college football. And of course, all the NFL stuff that we do keeps everything more interesting. Mondays, Thursdays, Sundays, all of that stuff. We got Thanksgiving coming up, by the way. Like, there's going to be bets. There's going to be bets, folks. My God, there's going to be bets.
Thanksgiving next week or the week?
Not 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay. That had me scared for a sec because normally I'm trying to figure out, what am I doing Thanksgiving? Do I have to work on Thanksgiving? Am I watching football? Am I having our own American Thanksgiving? Like, I got to figure out those things, right? But yeah, I mean, I guess I can't believe we're almost at Thanksgiving. No, I'm joking. But week 11 in the NFL should be a fun one as business is picking up. Teams are starting to separate themselves. We're trying to keep the good vibes going here on the pod. I really appreciate everyone tuning in. Of course, you can find me at Sheldon Alexander on the app formerly known as Twitter, and Sheldon Alexander on Instagram, pardon me. And of course, you know where to find the podcast: Apple, Spotify, and of course, YouTube. As I always say, though, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is a Clutch Picks betting podcast. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.